Hi there, thanks for tuning in. It's Toby here, just to say that these episodes were recorded before the deaths of Ken Westbury, the film cameraman, and David Graham, who plays Charlie the barman. So both will be referred to in the forthcoming broadcast in the present tense. Ken actually died as I was putting these original episodes together, and David the following year. Both were absolute legends who made it into their late 90s, and it was a pleasure to have met and interviewed both gentlemen, and I'm glad their work still exists and we can talk about it, and what a legacy they both left. Both of them far beyond their Doctor Who contributions, but nonetheless, I'm happy to celebrate them here. Welcome to this omnibus edition of Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, ask a friend to choose a Doctor Who story. I then have to watch it and commentate along, all the while trying to guess what their favourite thing about each episode might be.
Hello, my name is Martin Jameson, and Toby has very kindly asked me to select my favourite or an episode or a series of Doctor Who that is of particular interest to me to watch and talk about. And in case, in the very strong likelihood that you haven't got a clue who I am, I was born Martin Jacobs. And my father was Anthony Jacobs, who was an actor who some of you will know, played Doc Holliday in the 4-part Doctor Who series with William Hartnell called Gunfighters. And you may also have by now realised that my brother is Matthew Jacobs, who has recently made a rather wonderful documentary called Doctor Who Am I, about his experience writing the TV movie that featured Paul McGann. Don't ask me to say what number Doctor he was, because I don't know. Which is why I have to confess to you at this stage that I am myself not particularly a massive fan of Doctor Who. But don't switch off, because hopefully I will have some interesting things to say. So I did watch Doctor Who as a child. And I was a 60s kid. I was born in 1960. So I grew up with it. And my doctor... Everyone has their doctor, I'm told. My doctor was Patrick Troughton, and then later John Pertwee. I loved Patrick Troughton. He played the recorder or something, and he was rather strange, and I seem to remember finding him a little bit scary, which I liked. And I liked finding William Hartnell a little bit scary too. And as the various doctors got less and less scary, so I think I became less and less interested. So, analyse that, I think, as the expression goes. But I remember watching Doctor Who as a child and being genuinely terrified by it. I was the classic kid who hid behind the sofa. And I remember one time I was watching the Cybermen. I couldn't tell you which episodes they were, but I was watching the Cybermen, and we had this terrible old black and white television. All our televisions were awful. You could barely see on any of them because we didn't have any money, and we always had terrible kit. Anyway, I was hiding behind the sofa, and our television started to smoke. It was on fire in the middle of an episode with the Cybermen in, and I think effectively I pissed my pants. Whether I did actually piss my pants, I don't know. But the memory of the utter terror and fear of watching Doctor Who and the smoke coming out of the back of the television has never really left me. So I'm picking Gunfighters, obviously, because my dad was in it. Now, I don't really remember watching it at the time. I have to be honest. In fact, the first time I remember watching it was in the 1990s, and I have not watched it since then. And around about 1997, I got, I think, my first live-action television writing gig, and I was writing children's ward for Granada, the old company. grandfather back in the day. And I went into the writers' room. We didn't call them writers' rooms in those days. They were just rooms with writers in. They were just a room. Writer's room is a modern affectation. And anyway, I bumped into a young writer, and I was young too, by the name of Paul Cornell, who, of course, later went on to write some books for himself. And Paul's absolutely lovely, and I'd never met him before, and we started talking, and within about 30 seconds probably, he worked out who I was, even though I'd changed my name. It was Martin Jameson, but I was born Martin Jacobs, but he knew I'd changed my name. He knew exactly who I was. This is when I first discovered the phenomenon of the Whovian, or the person who's terrifically enthusiastic about Doctor Who, because he knew a lot about me. In fact, I should go on to say that when I first met Toby, which was where he was warming up for a recording of University Challenge, he knew more about me than I knew about me. Someone introduced us, and he started telling me things about me that I didn't even know. So that's how these things roll. Anyway, Paul, he said, "Oh my God, yes, you're Martin Jameson. Your father's Anthony Jacobs. Your brother's Matthew Jacobs. Blah 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 blah." And he said, "Gunfighters. Oh, I love Gunfighters. Some people don't really like Gunfighters, but I absolutely love it." I said, "Well, I haven't really seen it." The next day, our second day in the writers' room, or the room with writers, he arrived with what I can only guess was a sort of pirated VHS of Gunfighters, and he just gave it to me. He said, "Well, you have to have it. How can you be Martin Jacobs and not have a copy of your father's episodes?" And so that's how I first saw it. And I have to confess, I have not watched it since. So this is what I'm going to do now, and apparently what I'm going to do is talk about it. So here we go. I'm just turning it on now, and I'm going to play it. And, here we go. This is terribly, terribly exciting.
Haha, well, what a lovely introduction from Martin Jameson there, who, as he mentioned, I first met when he was in the audience of University Challenge, but I'd heard talk of him before. It's funny how all roads lead to Doctor Who, and I remember talking to Darren Thomas, who's a friend of mine, who I first met because he came to see Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf, I think. Anyway, I've seen Darren a few times, and he mentioned, because Darren had worked on Holby City, was working on Holby City at the time, he said, there's a scriptwriter who works for us called Martin Jameson, who is the son of Anthony Jacobs, not that son, the other son, not the TV movie son, but there's another son. And without even thinking about it, that obviously went into my mental storehouse. And then I was warming up University Challenge, which I did for many years. They don't have a warm-up man anymore. I was I think the second and last, because an old fellow had done it for years and years and years, and then I took over and did it until the money ran out. First they came for the audience's orange juice, then they came for the set designer being present on recording days, and then they came for me. But a nice thing to do, although I was fairly surplus to requirements. I'm sure you've seen the show. The audience aren't exactly in a frenzy. I was just there to distract them. But I think it was seen as somewhat coarse if I did too much. So I was deliberately quite low-key. TV warm-up is not really my style. Anyway, I would chat to the audience. And it was a lovely job and a lovely environment. And for some reason, I can't remember, but it just does, doesn't it? Doctor Who cropped up, and this young woman in the audience said, his dad was in Doctor Who. And I can't remember how it happened, but I said, I think, something like You in the Business or something like that. But it came up that he was a writer, and I went, oh, God, or a writer for Holby City even. And I went, oh, yes, you're Martin Jameson, your dad's Anthony Jacobs. And he went, did you know that? I was just like, well, it's in there. Yeah, because it certainly, however the conversation arose, I was able to show off. And that's, of course, a great icebreaker. And it's lovely when somebody knows who you are, even if it's via the fact that your dad was Doc Holliday in Doctor Who. But what he doesn't say in the story is the person that introduced us was, I think, must have been one of his students or whatever, or somebody he was teaching or mentoring, because it was young Dolly Rose Campbell, who is now a big star of Coronation Street, and brilliant she is too. So, and I of course now see and know her because she's a colleague of my partner Shez. So it's all a funny small world that all melds together. So there's a weird synthesis there of Holby City / Doctor Who, which led to me, Doctor Who / Coronation Street, which led to Dolly Rose, who's Coronation Street / sitting next to Martin from Holby City. So this curious thing. So there's just an illustration of the strange set of circumstances that led to this edition of Happy Times and Places, featuring the son of the star, one of the guest stars of the story in question. You know what? They may have had primitive technology when this was aired back in the day, but it's now some god-awful hour. I'm so behind with my podcasting. I'm determined to get an episode done tonight, and I was going to fire up the BritBox, but in the old days, if you wanted to turn on the telly, you turn on the telly. You want a channel, you press the button. Hey presto. It may not have been a gorgeous picture. Do you know what I mean? You may have had to fiddle with the aerial a little bit, but you pressed a button and you got what you wanted, essentially. I've switched on my thing to just fire up BritBox. It's going, no, it's not there now. Want to sign up for a 7-day trial? And I'm like, no, I pay for it. And I've searched on the internet and that's actually ended up taking me longer than it would have taken me to get the DVD out and put it in the Blu-ray player, which I've now done. But after trying to sort out the BritBox problem, because that's going to niggle me, I will dream about solving the BritBox problem and will wake up in the morning and it will be unsolved, but I won't remember. I'll only remember when I come to do this again tomorrow night and I've settled into my chair. Then I realise I have to get up and mess around again. But that's first world problems, but they're still really bloody annoying. So here, technology people, just have that you can press buttons and things work and things don't disappear. I'm not wild about all this, how we're so reliant on the internet. I think it breaks deliberately to irritate us. And to distract us from the fact that it's slowly closing in and will destroy us all. But that's just my theory. So I'm going back to a time when Doctor Who didn't necessarily have to do science fiction, because science fiction has things like wirelessly connected evil entertainment repositories of doom, and would do historical stories. But the seriousness of a lot of the historical stories occasionally gave way to those of a more humorous bent. And I've recently done the Romans. I've rushed this forward in proceedings just because I was talking to Martin and because I liked his introduction and because that's what I'm in the mood to do tonight. I'd got another story scheduled for tonight and I didn't fancy doing it. And these things depend on me being able to produce words. So I fancied doing the Gunfighters. A much maligned story. I mean, that's the introduction for me, that I grew up knowing this as the bad Doctor Who story. There weren't many in Doctor Who A Celebration and the Radio Times Doctor Who 20th Anniversary Special. Poorly drawn versions of, what was it, Doc Holliday, Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp said the 20th Anniversary Special, which was only, I think, otherwise rude about the Underwater Menace when it said the fish people weren't perhaps the greatest monsters. And then Doctor Who A Celebration, which described this as not good. It is not good, it is bad, and it is ugly, and could be described as the worst Doctor Who story of all time. The acting is not so much West Coast as West Ham, which was a joke I didn't get for many years. I just thought it was saying West Ham to be, I didn't get the ham element of that put down. And I think the Gunfight, I mean, the Doctor Who magazine has just done its survey where it's releasing the results in Doctor Order, and the Gunfighters is pretty close to the bottom. I mean, it's not bottom, it's not worst Doctor Who story of all time, but I don't think its reputation has ever quite recovered from the received wisdom that it's awful. And I know a lot of people who genuinely do think this is bad, but I think that's I think it's misunderstood. I mean, you can't legislate for people's taste, but I do think that this story has was always on the back foot, really, and But that said, that means that I might be prepared to give it more of a chance than I might otherwise, because I quite like the idea of championing the underdog. So I can never come to it purely either. I come to it with the received wisdom that it's the worst Doctor Who story of all time. So of course I want to go, oh, actually, but it has virtues all of its own that the hoi polloi cannot understand. So therefore I might not. I don't like the fact that I might, but I have to grudgingly suggest that my subconscious might have a bit of that going on with it, because my subconscious is a terrible snob. So it's one that's odd for me to have an honest appraisal of, because it comes with so much baggage that I'm sort of fighting against. But I tend to enjoy the Gunfighters. I think it's unfairly maligned, and I think it's got a lot to recommend it. And so with that in mind, this may seem odd to sort of people of generations below me, going, why this big intro? Because this was the 20th anniversary of Doctor Who. There was the idea that there might be a classic, an old Doctor Who story that wasn't good. This was revolutionary stuff. We tended to look back with great joy and appreciation and awe, which I know seems odd these days, when everybody tends to look back at history and either scold the people that existed there or patronise them. We were quite in awe of the people that came before us, and the programmes that were made. So I quite enjoyed that myself. Anyway, let us watch the worst Doctor Who story of all time. It's not. In the company of the son of one of its main players. I'm thrilled that Martin is. Martin, by the way, is an extremely good and prolific writer. He's written loads for radio. He's written many episodes of Holby City and much else besides. So, and I know Matthew a little bit as well. And I've interviewed Matthew for my Who's Round podcast. So it's nice to get the other brother to give his perspective. I think that's fun. So let us, and Martin has been doing some very good reviews as well online. He's always, he's always worth. He's a great. Martin's an excellent, sometimes very caustic reviewer of current television, not just for online websites, but also for on his own Facebook page, where I'm always eager to see what he's made of the latest television program. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure reading Martin without much sort of filter, just saying what he thinks, but always very entertainingly so. So I think we're in for a ride. I'm really pleased that Martin has taken part, even though it's ridiculous o'clock in the morning. I am gonna very much enjoy watching this first episode of the Gunfighters, and I'm going to press play on my DVD, which is why you can hear the menu going on in the background, in 3, 2, 1. Isn't it gorgeous seeing those beautiful opening titles, the beginning of which was lifted from a production of Tobias and the Angel, which was directed by Rudolph Cartier in 1960. I'm reminded of that because I've just been editing my chapter on Rudolph Cartier for my Quatermass book, and I managed to get it down from 22,000 words to 20,000 words, which, seeing as it's got to be 15,000 words, is probably not what I'd consider a good day's work. Anyway, what a great opening shot of Through the Wagon. I mean, one of the suggestions in Doctor Who Celebration was that the direction of this story was not very good. The script is pure Talbot Rothwell, it said. What does it say about the direction? I can't remember. The acting is more West Ham than West Coast. Can't remember what it says about the direction, but look, that's a great shot through a wagon. We got some lovely film. Barry Newbury's sets are actually astonishing. And you've got horses in the studio. This is all good stuff. And here we have the Clanton brothers, who for years and years, British actors, for some reason, couldn't do American. I don't know why. And the idea of a British actor doing American, there were very few. There were a few who specialised, people like Michael Balfour, for example. but largely, if they wanted Americans, they tried to get Americans or at least Canadians, because it was an accent that seemed to be at odds with sort of largely classically trained, let's be honest, British actors, and maybe that's why that it's American intonation and phraseology and drawl is counterintuitive if you're somebody that's been working very hard, because even regionally accented actors had to RP up. So maybe that was why. But I remember Gary Oldman was one of the sort of first who went, who latterly, of the more modern actors, you went, oh, he can really do American, wow. But whereas now, American TV is full of British actors. And often now as well, a lot of American productions have British actors, playing Americans, because if you're not on a Screen Actors Guild contract, you are a lot cheaper, particularly in terms of residuals. But that's a story for another day. This is beautiful quality. It's lovely to see. I love Dodo's outfit. That's a really funky outfit. I love her cap. Look at that lovely aerial shot. But yes, the American accents, I think, are do hamper this production slightly. But it is a time when, and they did try and get a lot of American actors or Canadian actors. I know they looked at Cecil Linder and Donald Sutherland to do this. And in fact, John Alderson, who plays Wyatt Earp, was flown over from Hollywood. He is British. He was British, which would have made things easier. But he was based in Hollywood, and he worked in Hollywood. And you've got Shane Rimmer there, who's Canadian, and his accent is clearly genuine and authentic. I know there's a slight difference between Canadian and American accents, but he stands out here as being the real deal. I mean, he knows he knows how to stand. He knows how to he knows how to deliver. He knows how to stand and deliver in a way that, I have to say, the Clanton brothers, who are quite a bunch. Now, he doesn't like being called Snake Eyes, whereas in the book there's a whole thing about that, where he's this sort of ugly reptilian kind of thing. But there's not really much of that in the screenplay. So we have the Clanton brothers. Maurice Good, who ended up being in Canada, is Phineas Clanton, and he gives the character a stutter. In order to give it a bit of characterization, I have a slight in real life. In real life, when I'm not performing, I have something. I'm doing it now. I have a bit of a stammer myself, but which, curiously, I tend to be able to overcome in performance more than in real life, except when I'm conscious of it, where I'm now battling against it. I'm not offended by him giving the character a stammer. You do anything you can as an actor in those days to make your performance slightly memorable. And he's in the film of Quatermass and the Pit, and I kept meaning to write to him, and I did get his address in Canada, and then I discovered, and then he died. I don't know why the Doctor's got a collection of guns, but I mean, you can be a person of non-violence and still appreciate the mechanics of a gun. Peter, I think you're smashing too, Peter Purvis. I love this. Might be Jackie Lane's best story as well. I love Stephen and Dodo in this. Peter Purvis is so versatile. He can adapt his performance style to whatever the story requires, and he does so with great elan. I love the Bible bashing Wyatt Earp, played by John Alderson, who is very much the genuine article. And he died in a actor's retirement home in Chicago, but he's in Blazing Saddles, for goodness sake. And he was a sort of cowboy type. I remember Richard Beale, who plays Bat Masterson, telling us that Alderson had stayed with him and burnt holes in his carpet. But he crops up in British TV all the time. He comes back to he's in one of the Beiderbecke serials with James Bolam and Barbara Flynn. But he's great. It's a lovely set, this as well. I like Stephen and Dodo look great in their cowboy costumes. Nice that you can see the wagon outside. Here's Sheena Marsh. Now, she's somebody that we struggled to get hold of. She never replied. She's in The Girl Who Was Death, the Prisoner episode, and she only died. She, Shane Rimmer, and William Herndl, who plays Ike Clanton, all died in the same year. But Sheena Marsh, nobody ever got a reply from her. Her real name was Shirley Knight. Shirley Knight. I've got some footage of her doing something else. Her husband, her husband was a keep fit judo guy whose name escapes me right now. But I compiled a whole load of stuff about Sheena Marsh, but we never got anything out of her. And this is David Cole. There's another David Cole who's an extra in some Davison stories, who was then acting a bit in the UK in the 80s. But by this time, this David Cole had gone to New Zealand, and you do see him pop up. He was in a telefilm that I saw, so he was sort of still about, and yet not quite available to us. And I think, bless him, he's terrible in this. He opened a donkey sanctuary, I think. I think Sheena Marsh is great fun. I wish I knew more about her. I wish she... Because for years there was a rumour that she was Rex Tucker's daughter, the director Rex Tucker's daughter, but she's not, because I think Rex Tucker said in an interview, "Oh yes, and my daughter was in it," and people put two and two together and made 4 things which were wrong, because his daughter is Jane Tucker of Rod, Jane and Freddie fame, and she is a non-speaking artiste in certainly the last episode. Here is the man himself, Anthony Jacobs, who is wearing a wig there. If you see him in other stuff, he's a bald-headed man, an excellent voice man, a very famous radio actor by this point. His name was very well known. If you listen to the Wireless in the 1960s, you would know Anthony Jacobs. He at this point, he and John Alderson are the sort of main billed guest stars. I think they get the billing in the Radio Times. Lawrence Payne then takes top guest billing when he arrives. But yeah, I like the way he does that, and he gives a Holiday a real sort of ratty delivery. I like it. He's really playing a character here. He's a proper character actor, Anthony Jacobs, and I think he invests Doc Holliday with a sort of a spikiness that actually also makes him very lovable. And she's good fun. She's got a lot of energy, and I love all the costumes. It's that famous idea, isn't it, that that's a lovely shot as well of having the feet of Bat Masterson and full length of the studio, and then the camera's tracking across, and then you've got a high shot. That's these camera positionings of Rex Tucker, I think, are rather good. Now, I love Richard Beale here, who's a sort of pugnacious sort of bulldog of an actor. He's just been the Refusion voice in the Ark. He's the propaganda voice in the Macra Terror. He turns up as the Minister of Ecology in The Green Death because he was great friends with the director Michael Bryant, because he's a great man of the sea. Now, Richard only died a couple of years ago at the age of something like 94, 96, and was still going strong. He used to phone up any answers. I remember when we did the voice test, I was desperate for him to be on the commentary, and I'm glad we got him on, because he's had such a long career. And I wrote to him to do a Who's Round, and he said, yes, you should interview me. I've been in lots of things, but I will have nothing to do. And I said, we put it out free on the internet. He said, I will have nothing to do with the internet because of identity theft and all of that sort of thing. He obviously got it into his head. He was rattled by the idea of the internet, which was a shame. And I didn't pursue it because he lived sort of in the middle of nowhere. And we did have him on the commentary for this, at least. I wish we'd done a making of for this one, but the way that the DVDs were run in those days meant that corners were cut. Unnecessarily, which means that we had loads of people available who we could have got on camera, and we didn't. But yeah, Beale was a fascinating guy, but he had quite a cussed sense of humour. I remember when we did the voice check for the commentary, you say, what did you have for breakfast? And he said, I had a rancid sausage roll, which was awful at the train station. He had I really liked him, but he was somebody who would not let a terse comment by if there was one to be made. I like the rapport he has with Wyatt Earp. I think that these two are have an established relationship, which is rather nice. And I interrupted myself earlier by saying, there's that thing of, the UK can't do westerns, and it's not a genre that you would ever sort of seek to be made over here, because America, well, and then the spaghetti westerns, of course, they've been done elsewhere, and in exemplary fashion elsewhere by the Americans and the Italians. It's not necessarily our métier in the same way that I particularly want to watch something set in a 1920s British drawing room, made in the States. That's the hurdles overcome at both ends seem unnecessary to even try when they can be done better elsewhere. But Doctor Who, of course, has to try everything, and I don't see it doing a western as any worse than it trying anything else, from space opera to action adventure or whatever. I think these two have a great rapport, and I think Jackie Lane, who is not the world's greatest actress, is good fun in this. The way that Donald Cotton writes Dodo as somebody sort of plucky and amused by it all is she rises to the occasion. And their roles were slightly swapped over, weren't they? Because she was supposed to be singing and Stephen playing the piano. Jackie just went, I'm not singing. And Jackie, like Martin Jameson, I met Jackie Lane under very strange circumstances. I saw her on a train. I'm sure I've told this story before, so let's just leave it at that. But the one companion I was never going to meet when we were doing the DVDs or at any Doctor Who event, fate brought me together with on a train on the way to Manchester, and we had a bit of a chat and exchanged emails thereafter. And I was so sorry when she died, because she was something of an enigma. I love the tooth outside Doc Holliday's surgery. That is a lovely, lovely joke. And their treatment of Hartnell's brilliant here. Look, he's enduring all of this rather brilliantly without pulling focus. He's a very good comedy performer. And I love the and why has the Doctor gone to the Wild West to get his tooth out? Well, it's because he doesn't know where he's going, of course. But I think you'd go, I might have to hang on. And have you got nothing in the TARDIS either? It doesn't matter. I mean, it's a comedy. That's the whole thing of it. But we can make up our own reasons for he's got carried away in the situation and he really needs his tooth out now. And that is a fantastic joke. I never touch alcohol. Well, I do. And he has a drink. And there's a real edge to Holiday as well. He's funny, and I like the way he's sort of very welcoming of the Doctor. But when he says I've not tolerated any complaints yet, there's a real edge. This is a man who's gunned people down for crossing him, and that's never far away. Even though he's a sort of scoundrel and a charmer, Doc Holliday, but he's great. And I think this for what for a show that and indeed television at this time that struggles to sometimes pull off popular scenes or senses of time and place in a small BBC studio. I think that I buy this bar setting. Dave, again, that's a lovely high shot that's afforded to us by the high stairs. Oh, that's on film now. The shooting of the bottles. I will talk about William Handel, who plays Ike Clanton, at some point, but we've got 4 episodes. Who yeah, I was in touch with. Well, he was again somebody we couldn't track down when we were doing the DVD, but I did manage to get hold of him. That's great that David Graham decides to emerge from behind the counter. I find I find the accent he's doing. Did he say he said he was doing Walter Brennan, who was a famous Western actor? I think he stuffed his cheeks with cotton wool and gives you this kind of funny performance. I wonder if it's a piece of character acting too far. I mean, David Graham, who, as I record this, is still doing Grandpa Pig from his own home. There was a lovely picture of him on Twitter the other day. He's in his mid to late 90s now, and is a legend and still working. But I would say that both his Professor Kerensky in City of Death and his Charlie the Barman, turn the character acting up to 11. And this is, Donald Cotton is a very witty writer, isn't he? There's a brilliant documentary online about Donald Cotton that's gone into great detail and tracked down some of his friends and former colleagues. And of course, you think of somebody who's so witty like Cotton as blowing into Doctor Who, doing it not perhaps quite getting how it was normally done, but because he was witty and better than it or whatever. But actually, he didn't write an awful lot else for television, and was sort of a bit in the doldrums as a sort of character actor in regional theatre. Whereas I sort of imagine people come in, do Doctor Who, and then go off and have marvellous lives, or I did when I was younger. But of course, life is different to that. William Herndl there did a lot of modelling, did a few cigarette adverts. Very handsome man, very interesting life. Terrible actor. I think these two, Bill Herndl here, who I had great times with, and David Cole are really bad. But if anything can stand a bad performance, it's this, because it is this heightened pastiche. It's almost because it's a Western being done in the UK, you need a couple of not very good actors not being very American. So it's not everybody's got the handle on how to do this properly, but that means that the people like Jacobs and John Alderson doing it are a real treat. And Rimmer's great. That you sort of wish they could have got a few more of the genuine article. And this is Donald Cotton at his witty best. Doc, what? Holiday. And of course it's called A Holiday for the Doctor because Doc Holliday the Doctor gets mistaken for Doc Holliday, a holiday for the Doctor. So, which is all good. And it's great that Holliday, again, who's been charming, and they've been very welcoming and hospitable to the Doctor, is now absolutely prepared to set him up for a fatal encounter in the pub down the road. Now, and I haven't even mentioned the Ballad of the Last Chart Saloon, sung by Linda Barron, who's also now no longer with us. Gosh, remember when this was a story where we had so many people from. We should have made a documentary for it then. We should have had the budget to do that. So that's, anyway, come on. Cannot regret too many things, but I regret that. Your enjoyment of this story depends on whether you like the ballad or not. I think the ballad is great fun. I think one of the joys of classic Doctor Who, on the day actually that I record this, when Murray Gold has been announced as returning to Doctor Who, and I love Murray Gold, and I love the fact that and I like Segun Akinola as well, but I love Murray Gold, and I think he understands and scores the programme very well. So I'm not complaining that we have a single composer, but I equally like the fact that in old Doctor Who, a composer could, a new composer could come in, or a regular composer, the same to you and many of them. That's a good joke. That's great. Could come in and respond to the story as they wanted it to, as they thought. Tristram Carey, who wrote the score for this, nice high staircase, even though it's got a very wobbly banister. Although it probably would actually in the Wild West, wouldn't it? I'm not sure in the same way that people would pause at the stairs waiting for the queue in the same way that those guys do. But but Tristram Carey did the score, that wonderful discordant alien score for the Daleks. And then a couple of years later, he's doing this, is it Cat Ballou pastiche, where you have the action being sung over. And again, I think for a Doctor Who story, to go, right, let's for this one story, let's the incidental music be this. And the director's gone for it because Rex Tucker wrote extra verses. And I think it's a rather charming addition because it's Doctor Who being the same yet different. And this is still a Doctor Who adventure. It's witty. It's got jeopardy. It's got time travel. But it's also very silly and good fun. And Purvis is brilliant. He's having to sing, which is a pain in the arse. While Jackie Lane mimes at the piano, the tinkling of Tom McCall. And he does that wonderful comic double take, and he's clearly not wanting to. I don't think it's the best orchestrated cliffhanger. I know the suggestion is, they're waiting and they're going to blast the Doctor as he comes through the door, but I don't think the cliffhanger sells that particularly well because they go out on the song, "Don't Shoot the Pianist." It's a great episode title, though. I think that rattles along. I think that is a lot of good fun. And yeah, what a bunch of actors who all, as I say, not that long ago, 10 years ago, when we were doing all of this stuff, most of these actors were still with us. Ballad music by Tristram Carey, sung by Linda Barron. Nurse Gladys Emanuel, Captain Rack. Well, I think there's a lot in that, and I think it's all jolly fun, and it's definitely not the worst Doctor Who story of all time. And it looks beautiful on the DVD that I have, nicely cleaned up from when I first saw it on fairly rough VHS. So, what is my favourite thing about? I mean, it's even got a Doctor Who joke, hasn't it? I am Dr. Caligari. What is it? Dodo Dupont, Wizard of the Ivory Keys. I think I've used Wizard of the Ivory Keys. Yes, we have sometimes have live piano music at XS Malarkey, my comedy club, on a Tuesday night from the lovely JK. And excuse me, I've occasionally described Jay as the Wizard of the Ivory Keys, because it is a good description. I love Donald Cotton's take on Doctor Who. And again, he seems so carefree because he's such an easy dispenser of wit. And then when I heard this documentary that I'll give you the details of at some point during this 4-part Happy Times and Places, is actually a slightly sadder life than that, and one riddled with financial insecurity and too much alcohol, which is all too familiar a story. And I was fascinated by this documentary and admiring of its work. And the work and research that had got into it, and part of me went, oh, I wish I didn't know that. I'd got him as this sort of lofty untouchable, and of course he was just as flawed and disappointed and knackered as the rest of us. But he stands as a witty, a totem for irreverence in Doctor Who, and that's no bad thing. And actually, these days, when I think sometimes we can be prone to take Doctor Who too seriously, somebody who goes, "Oh no, it's about someone who travels through time and space in a police box." We can throw a bit of humour into the mix because it's daring us to. Now, that's not to say that Doctor Who should have the piss taken out of it, but what it is doing, it is having a very tongue-in-cheek look at the genre, and yet it's doing other elements of the genre quite nicely. I also like the fact that the Doctor doesn't drink in this, actually, when having just talked about Cotton's later propensity to imbibe. And as somebody who's been known to indulge in the cups myself, I rather like the fact that the Doctor is teetotal. It makes it, if the Doctor does it, it makes it seem somehow not a compromise. It makes it seem a pretty cool choice for somebody who, it's my hero, travels through space and time, and he doesn't bother with alcohol. I like that. It's a nice little subtle note. Sends out a little subtle message to the kids. I also like the fact that Pertwee appreciates his fine wine and drinks a scotch whilst twatting a gorilla in Day of the Daleks. So again, you can like two contrasting things at once. So I'm trying to think what... now, this is going to be really hard because Martin, one, isn't a fan. And two, obviously, he's got a personal stake in this. I mean, Anthony Jacobs is one of my favourite things in this. I do like the scene in the dentists. I like Anthony Jacobs as Doc Holliday. I like John Alderson as Wyatt Earp. I think the sets are fantastic. I do like the ballad. And I like the Doctor Who joke. And it's funny when that dog, because that shot of Bat Masterson with Wyatt and Stephen and Dodo and the Doctor, that was the picture that accompanied the descriptor of the Gunfighters as the worst Doctor Who story ever in Doctor Who: A Celebration. So I always associate that scene with the Gunfighters being supposedly bad. And then loads of pictures were in the Doctor Who archives. But I thought, when I saw those pictures come out, because they had sort of different groupings, Anthony Jacobs was in one of the pictures, I think with David Cole and John Alderson, maybe. They sort of mixed up the groupings. But I remember thinking that maybe Anthony Jacobs was Seth Harper because... his features were sort of a bit sort of rattlesnakey, snake eyesy Harper, and I didn't know what Anthony Jacobs looked like. I mean, he actually doesn't look much like Anthony Jacobs in that anyway, because he's got a false moustache and a wig on. So it was only when I saw it that I, discovered which characters were which. But there's actually loads of really nice pictures of the various different cast members of the Gunfighters, I have to say. Right ho, my favourite thing, and of course he's hurt his tooth, the Doctor, from eating one of Cyril's sweets at the end of the Celestial Toymaker. I mean, what a show! It goes from the Ark, which is this sort of hard sci-fi. I love the Ark, by the way, to the Celestial Toymaker, which is this sort of surreal, nightmarish take on, parlour games, to the Gunfighters, which is a Western pastiche. And I know it's an uncomfortable fit for Innes Lloyd and Jerry Davis, who I think were much happier with, bases full of, tough talking types and international crews and, sci-fi for starters. But it's all come from the sort of fertile and ambitious minds of John Wiles and Donald Tosh, who I think are quite an odd pairing for Doctor Who. Obviously, Wiles not getting on with William Hartnell, and they spend most of their time having to do the Daleks' master plan, which they'd have inherited. So we have this funny period where they sort of throw all sorts of different things at the wall, and we get this really quite bizarre, but I think really interesting and eclectic period of Doctor Who that is all too short for me. I would have been interested to see what more they could have done with the show. So my favourite thing in episode 1 of the Gunfighters is, I think what struck me about that the most this time around is, I think it's a very handsome production. I think the sets are fantastic. I think they're doing to do a Western. I know there's some evening shooting as well, but you have horses in the studio. I mean, that's incredible. To do a Western in with the resources that the BBC had, and to do one that actually looks so good, and those high angles and the shots through the shots through wheels or from foot level. He does really interesting things with his camera angles. Does Tucker in the studio and on film? His cameraman is Ken Westbury, who's a fantastic cameraman. So, is it the fact that it looks good, that it looks like they have a decent stab at doing a Western in the studio? Costumes were all great. Yeah, I'm going to stick up for the production because, again, when this was written up, it was, the whole thing was bad. Well, actually, just looking at the nitty-gritty of it, it's handsomely mounted, brilliant set design, costumes all work, it looks good. It's a good production. It's a decent stab at a West, which is the main thing that it's supposed to be, is a Western in a BBC studio. And I think it pulls that off. Considering it's also a comedy Western, you could have cut corners and gone, well, it is a jokey one. They haven't cut corners. They've very ambitiously, Barry Newbury, the set designer, kudos to him, mounted it without the tongue in their cheek. They've not made any compromises because, well, it's only a comedy. So I think the fact that it looks much better than it should, and that's a synthesis of the direction, the shooting. I think it is interestingly shot. The costumes, the set design. It's a handsome production. It's a decent production. It looks like a Western, or it looks like as good a Western as the BBC could be expected to do in 1966. However, I'm sure Martin, who is a very smart guy, has chosen something completely different. So, A Holiday for the Doctor, through the lens of the son of that holiday. Let's see what he has to say.
Okay, so I've just finished episode 1, which is called The Holiday for the Doctor. And, of course, the reason my dad was cast in this, aside from the fact that he was a well-respected character actor at the time, was that he looked a good deal like William Hartnell. And, of course, the story hinges on mistaken identity, Doctor, Doc, Holiday, and all that kind of thing. And, it was really fun watching it. I've heard people be terribly rude about the song, but I rather like it. And it's very beautifully shot. I mean, you can see the painted backcloths and all that kind of stuff. But Rex Tucker, is it, who directed it, has done a great job. He's obviously been watching High Noon, and so, with his limited resources, he's got the camera down low, and there's some deep focus stuff that, looks quite classy. I mean, yeah, there are some terrible American accents. There really are. And on that theme, although I don't particularly remember it myself at the time, when I was about 12, I went on a holiday with my dad, and he talked a lot about it, which actually had a great influence on me. Later on, I became a theatre director and a radio producer. And, of course, he took everything very seriously. He was a classically trained actor. And he was on the radio rep for the BBC for many years. And he took acting incredibly seriously. And it's interesting to watch in relation to this episode because while some of them are taking it seriously, William Hartnell's taking it seriously, and a couple of the others, some of these actors look, let's be honest, they look like they're slumming it a bit, and their American accents are pretty dodgy. But my dad talked to me in at great length about the accent because he was meticulous in his research. So he knew that Doc Holliday, I think, was born in Georgia, and he'd moved to Philadelphia. But in the script, they talk about his dad being in Alabama. And, he was used to researching accents for all the radio plays that he was in. And he was in hundreds, if not thousands, of radio plays. And he said, well, the thing was, in the whenever this is, 1870s, whatever year it was, I can't remember, you're in Tombstone, Arizona, what's the accent? And he said, well, he said the thing was there wasn't really an American accent in the way we understand now, and there's very little record of it. And this really frustrated him, because what he would have liked to have done is have an accent that was accurate to the time. But then he said, well, of course, nobody would understand that, because they see the accents as coming from Western movies. So I think he said in the end he went for something from Oklahoma, is my memory, but I may have got this wrong. Anyway, he got tapes, and he went and consulted whoever you consulted in those days at the BBC about accents, and he worked very hard on his accent, and you can see he's playing the character for real, which is lovely. He never hammed anything in his life. I mean, he was quite a big, bold actor of his time. He was never a method actor, but he took acting very seriously. And what really amuses me watching it is, I may be reading too much into this, and I'm sure you guys all know a lot more about this than I do, but I really sense that William Hartnell, obviously, who's come into acting through a different route, but has a massive amount of experience. I sort of sense that he knows that he has a very well-trained, serious actor that he's sharing the screen with. And to me, it looks like an act-off. But there you go, I may be wrong, but at times that's what it looks like. And I really love that. And it's really fun to see. I have to be honest, I haven't really got a clue what's going on. There's something about, there's going to be Wyatt Earp and the Clayton boys or something, and they're going to do some stuff. And there's going to be a gunfight, and there's mistaken identity. However, I have a request. You see, I have a memory of there being an amazing production still photograph of my dad as Doc Holliday, poised over the dentist's chair with William Hartnell, and about to take his tooth out. And that shot isn't really in the episode. My dad had it. I don't know where it is. It doesn't appear in my brother's film. I don't have a copy of it. I have looked online. I can't find it. If anybody has got this photograph, and you want to do me a great favour, I would love a good resolution copy of that still. I'm sure I haven't misremembered it. My memory is pretty good, even though I'm fairly ancient. Okay, so I'm now going to watch the second episode, which is called "Don't Shoot the Pianist" or the piano player or something. So here I go. Here we go. Is it going to come on now? Come on, play. Yay. Oh no, it's always. It's telling me what I've got to do.
There are 5 options.
Yeah, I know there are 5 options. Thank you. Can you just tell me? Here we go. Yeah, here it is. Don't shoot the pianist. Here I go. Right, toodly-dum. I love this theme tune. I know you all love this theme tune, but I don't like the new theme tune with the orchestra. I like this theme tune. It sounds like it's played on rubber bands. This is my idea of a theme tune.
I'm not cutting any of that out. Well, I'm very much enjoying Martin's contribution. Did we choose the same thing? I don't know that we did. I don't know. I think this one might not be scored in the traditional way, because Martin didn't specify one particular thing. He chose a number of different things, as did I, some of which were the same, some of which were different. So however you're scoring this, you must choose. I don't remember a photo. There are a lot of photos of the Gunfighters, but I've got the most of the ones that I've seen are from the filming, although actually that one of Brad Masterson and that I just described but in Doctor and a Celebration is that's from the studio. So, but I don't recall one from of the Doc Holliday with the dentist chair. So I would say, Martin, if your dad did keep it, have a look. He might have the only copy, and that's not unusual. I know I've known other people from BBC Productions, who've taken photos away or been given photos that have turned out to be the copies that the BBC didn't have. So I've got a couple from the Savages that Kay Patrick had been given by somebody, which have been in Doctor Which. As soon as I got them, I donated to Doctor Who magazine, and because I'm not that guy, and I've got a couple from Quatermass in the Pit from Cease Linder, who was considered for a role, Canadian actor who plays Dr. Roney in Quatermass in the Pit, who was considered for a role in the Gunfighters, and he'd taken a couple of photos away that aren't in the BBC's collection, that are also on the Blu-ray of Quatermass in the Pit, because I'm not that guy. But I don't recall any of Doc Holliday over the Doctor in the dentist chair, which also I would probably choose as my favourite scene of that. I love the bit where he takes a drink, and I like the bit where they sort of tease the Doctor and the rapport between Doc and Kate, and the way that they very wittily engage with the Doctor, and the way that Hartnell responds to that, I think is the best exchange in an episode that's got some nice sort of back and forths and interplay between everybody. And I do agree with Martin that Hartnell responds very well. You see Tom Baker do it as well. If there's an actor that he respects, he's very deferent to Beatrix Lehman in The Stones of Blood. If there's an actor he respects, he just checks himself. And if there's an actor he's not wild about, Tom Baker can be a bit dismissive. But I think Hartnell certainly engages very well with Anthony Jacobs, and those scenes are great. I hadn't considered that actually one of the reasons for Jacobs' casting was because he's has a similar look to Hartnell, but actually I can see that now. Their faces are a similar kind of shape, but I hadn't really considered that, which makes actually more sense of the storyline of the mistaking, rather than just, it's a guy in a dentist shop and I say Doc and he says yes. But I mean, I quite like that anyway. I think the mistaken identity stuff is quite fun, and of course you can get away with it in Western times because there aren't pictures and ID cards and all of that sort of thing. You would have wanted posters up, but you'd have to then commit them to memory to remember what somebody looks like. I'm sure there were all sorts of injustices perpetrated based on people vaguely looking like somebody else. So I love the fact they have fun with all of that. I'm very much going to enjoy Martin's contribution to this. I can tell he's engaged with it, with all of his knowledge as an exemplar of the creative arts himself, but also with his personal insight, courtesy of his father. I was fascinated to hear that stuff about the accent, but just gives it a bit more of a personal view, doesn't it? It feels like we can almost touch it a little bit, which isn't always the case with these. So I'm delighted by the dynamic being provided by Martin. I'm delighted I chose to watch the Gunfighters after, wanting to go on some sort of spree inspired by Brit Box's appalling behaviour. And what a joy it is that something written off by fan lore as the worst Doctor Who story of all time. I know it's not thought of that now, but as I say, one that has always, I think, been somewhat bruised by fan perception and by history. And Rex Tucker, of course, was going to be the first actual producer of Doctor Who, and his name is only on the credits of 3 episodes. 3, Toby, how come? Well, we'll discuss that when we get to episode 4. Rex Tucker, though, and he was still about until, relatively, it's been 20 odd years, hasn't it? But he was interviewed by Doctor Who magazine at least, and got bits and bobs out of him. But yeah, I think, and he was great friends with, I remember Richard Beale talking about my great friend Rex. So lots of characters on display. Oh, what fun it must have been to have hung around. And the Mirror Pics did a load of pictures, didn't they? But those were of the rehearsals. So I wonder if but I don't think there's any of Anthony Jacobs in those. I'll go and have a mooch and look for some photographs for Martin. I will also dig out the details of that excellent Donald Cotton documentary, but not right now because it's way past my bedtime, and I need to go and brush my teeth because if I don't, I might end up in all sorts of trouble. Well, that's the end of episode 1. They think the Doctor's Doc. Next week I'll give you an anecdote about Errol Flynn's... With a mic on my table and socks on my feet, it's time for episode 2, which I hope will be neat. I intended to do that, which is why it wasn't very good. I could have composed my own version, and instead... This is all a bit of a surprise to me, because I was supposed to be recording some pickups for Radio 4 Extra, and... the people next door are playing the piano very loudly, so I can't. So I don't think I should send them the sheet music for the Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon. I hope the piano knows it. If I can darn toot and hear it if it can. But that's fine, because I can do that at another time, and I don't think it'll bleed through to this. It's slightly different. But I just thought it was amusing that I was getting interrupted by piano play, which is what happens and I'm going to do... Well, I'm not going to go around and shoot the pianist, because this episode is called Don't Shoot the Pianist, which I wouldn't do. Next door neighbours are very nice, and it's normally lovely hearing the piano playing next door, but it occasionally interferes with my voiceover work, but that's fine, because I will just do it at some other time, and instead I'm doing this, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching episode 1 of the Gunfighters. And the rather exciting thing is, because of the way that I'm doing, because I'm so behind with my Patreon commitments. I'm not behind. No, I am almost live when it comes to releasing my Patreon episodes. So what that means is I have feedback not only from listeners, but also from Martin, who I sent the episode to, because and he says, I enjoyed listening to the audio on the flight to San Jose. Yes, funny to remember the Corrie connection. I remember I was introduced to Martin via Dolly Rose, who is now a star. Brilliant she is in Corrie. I didn't know her then. I had just directed Dolly in a play at 24/7 called Loaded by Jojo Kirtley. I had never met Dolly before then, and I was blown away by her riveting stage charisma. The play had its flaws, but she won an award for her performance. I knew in rehearsals that she was something special, so I emailed all the casting directors and producers I knew to come and see it. And that led to her coming to the street for a short term, and then the rest is history. So how exciting that, that in the genesis of Martin being on this podcast is also the making of somebody who is a major part of Coronation Street and a brilliant actress. And also she's great because I occasionally see her volunteering at the food bank up the road and stuff like that. She's a good egg. I don't think she's a Doctor Who fan though, and I don't know her well enough to ask her. I suppose I could get Shez to, but I have to be careful there. She did speak to Helen Worth about Colony in Space though for me, which was very nice. Anyway, enough Coronation Street, because I'm sure most of you don't even know who I'm talking about, because it seems to me there's the Coronation Street and Doctor Who Venn diagram has a very small yoke. Does it have a yoke, a Venn diagram? Very, very small middle bit. Anyway, but what this means is that a few people on Patreon have listened to episode 1 before I've recorded this, episode 2. So I can actually do feedback, which one doesn't normally do in Happy Times and Places because of the nature of the recording. However, James Lark, hi James, says, I love the Gunfighters. Though I too spent years under the Haining-influenced belief that it was the worst story ever. And let's remember that those words were written within a year of Time Flight going out. Good point, James. It still slightly baffles me that anyone would take this story that seriously. A, it is clearly meant to be funny, and B, it is clearly funny. But perhaps the forward-looking comic sensibility of cotton scripts is a bit subtle in the shadow of the knockabout humour of, say, the Romans, rather old-fashioned, even in 1964. But these episodes still stand as some of the funniest Doctor Who ever, even by today's standards, perhaps because, as I say, the tone is startlingly modern, even more evident in the novelisation. Stephen may stop short of calling himself Clint Eastwood, but the joke about his clothes beats Back to the Future 3 to it by 24 years. I'm also glad that you've drawn attention to just how good it looks, a real visual feast, incredible given their limitations. The song is the icing on the cake. I did my chronological watch-through with a fan who was far less versed in existing opinions about stories, and when we got to the end of the Gunfighters, he announced, unprompted, well, that's the best one so far. And maybe I agree. Thanks, James. And I just thought it was because I'd struggled to articulate why I think the humour of Donald Cotton is slightly more sophisticated, perhaps, than that of Dennis Spooner, or indeed the Romans. But I then struggle to think about what is sophisticated or not, because humour is actually about making you laugh. And actually, the Romans has loads of Latin references, whereas Cotton indulges in some terrible puns. So why is that? I don't know, but there just seems to be something slightly wittier, slightly more Woodhouseian. I don't know, because it's not. I don't know. But anyway, there is to me a difference between Cotton's humour and Dennis Spooner's, and I seem to think of Cotton existing on a higher plane, and I'm not sure that that's fair. So I'm arguing with myself even now, but I liked the way that James had put and articulated the different styles of humour between the Romans and the Gunfighters. So I'm happy to be able to sort of augment this broadcast with that well put opinion. David Gillespie Pratt, I'm going to mention, one, because he's the listener previously known as David Gillespie, and as I record this, just recently celebrated nuptials I spotted on Twitter. So congratulations to David and his other half, and I wish you both an awful lot of happiness, and thank you for still existing round these here parts, because I'm sure you've got better things to do, having just got married, gentlemen. But anyway, thank you, and lots of love and luck. And David just wanted to pop back and say he thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope you didn't listen on your honeymoon, David. And I quite like the cliffhanger too. A slow build of danger instead of a sudden ending. I've always enjoyed the Gunfighters, and I'm glad I'm not the only one. I take your point about the cliffhanger. Yes, okay, but my sort of instinctive gut reaction to it is, it's a bit sort of leaden. It doesn't have a sort of sense of impact that some do. But no, I take that. Frank Shales, regular correspondent, says, "Yeehaw! Now you're darn tootin' partner. One of the most fun stories in the entire run. As you can't have Daleks or dark SF every week, or even portentous historicals like the Aztecs, good as they are, then there should be more like this one and the Mythmakers. Funny for kids and adults without being Tomorrow People levels of silly." James Curray Smith, Jim Smith says, "Hurrah, the Gunfighters, just what I wanted. Perfectly timed arrival in the app for me, about to spend the morning painting my kitchen. I adore this story, I always have. Like you, I've had the worst story ever thing, but only second hand. I hadn't even read Doctor Who: A Celebration, but in 1990, a guy who copied bootleg Doctor Who for me for a small fee, that was illegal, knowing I paid in videotapes, no money changed hands, knowing I liked Hartnell, told me he thought it was the best Hartnell story. Gosh, I was suspicious. So he said, look, I'll do you a copy gratis. And he did. Hooray for him and you. And Martin's excellent memories of his dad and Hartnell having an act-off. Yes, indeed. Martin's a super guest. And a reminder, if for some reason you haven't listened to episode 1, Martin Jameson, prolific radio writer, prolific scripter for Holby City, is the son of Anthony Jacobs, who plays Doc Holliday, but he's the son of Anthony Jacobs, who plays Doc Holliday, who didn't write the Doctor Who TV movie. Jim Smith also says, if I'd had to pick my favourite moment from this episode, it would be Peter Purvis's delivery of, well, let's hope the piano knows it, which might be the bit that makes me laugh most in all Doctor Who. I think I was talking over that, and I think you're quite right, Jim. It is a glorious moment of comedy, and Peter Purvis, I think, deserves a knighthood for that delivery. It's fantastic. David Green is very pithy. The Gunfighters is simply fabulous, and that includes the song. And I too love the song, although I can sort of understand the people who don't. So that's a bit of extra material at the top of the show. But now put your guns away, because we're gonna put an embargo on any assassination of people displaying musical talent as I press play on Don't Shoot the Pianist, episode 2 of the Gunfighters, in 3, 2, 1. It's slightly incongruous, isn't it? This rather wonderful, moody sci-fi, these amorphous clouds and that echoing music from the very depths of space-time to lead into a sort of knockabout comedy about the Gunfighters. I'm still obsessing over why I think it is that's different. And I'm not knocking Spooner, by the way, when I say this. I think Dennis Spooner's stuff is much more accessible. I mean, the way that Spooner feeds humour into Doctor Who, I think is sort of the template that Doctor Who, wouldn't be quite the same now without. Whittaker was a wonderful architect of Doctor Who, but then Spooner coming immediately afterwards to add that great gift for comedy and accessible sort of, pulpy drama that he had, but the wit with which he infused it. Is essential to the DNA of Doctor Who. Whereas I don't think Cotton's caught on quite so well. Cotton, I imagine, is a sort of like a slightly eccentric prep school master, writing little ditties for the end of term review, and everyone going, God, he should be professional, this guy. Peter Purves is, I think, heroic in this. I mean, Peter Purves responds. To sing whilst also being really pissed off is a great skill, and she owns this as well, doesn't she? Sheena Marsh coming in to distract everyone with her sort of ballsy femininity, if you can have such a thing. Yes, I wish she'd answered a few. Any letters that she got, but some people are private. Some people don't want to talk about A, their acting careers, or B, Doctor Who, and maybe even anything. But yes, I'm sure she was really called Shirley Knight. I have some footage of her somewhere in a video with her husband, who is a keep fit bodybuilder type. I love this high angle shot that they've got from the top of the stairs. That's very good. I mean, that's got to be a wig, isn't it, that she's wearing? And she's... And I mean, why not have a music... She's miming that, isn't she? Why not have a music... Yeah, she's not miming it very well, actually. I haven't noticed that before. But this is great, and there's a lot of movement. There's this wonderful high angle. I mean, he's making good use of the set, is... Rex Tucker, and I love the fact you can see the bullet holes behind the bar. And of course, the reason Stephen's playing the piano now and has sent Dodo away is because he was originally supposed to be playing the piano anyway. So they've had to sort of contrive that move to cover up the original move of Stephen having to sing in Dodo's stead because Jackie Lane couldn't or wouldn't. He looks great, Bill Herndl, there with his stubble and his sort of deadpan, threatening thing going on. It's only when he opens his mouth that there's a problem. I know Maurice Good had been appearing in a just finished, I think, appearing in a stage show before he was cast in this. So he's the most sort of high profile, really, of the Clanton brothers, and I know that his. The decision to give Phineas a stutter was his idea. He's acting away in the background, isn't he? Between Shane Rimmer and William Hartnell, there he's getting himself in shot. Is this bit where they do the in sync alive that he is, which is sort of quite funny. But I mean, Maurice Good's not doing much of an American accent there either. So I think when this has a reputation for bad acting, I do think it is the Clanton brothers who are probably the most at fault. But there's something, isn't there, about the Wild West that is it's got a sort of dirty danger about it, and it's been romanticized, but there are great examples of the genre where it's, Deadwood's wonderful, isn't it? If you've not seen Deadwood, that's how to do a Western. Whoa, really, with an Englishman, Ian McShane, being absolutely vile in it. But Hartnell is great at negotiating this. He's slightly, he's slightly oblivious to the danger. Cotton sort of writes the Doctor as an accidental. Hero is a bit of a loose word, but he's I quite like that, because I mean, it does make him slightly more clueless than he sometimes is. But alive, that is. They did their best with that, didn't they? But it's a pretty rum moment. And she's great here. Sheena Marsh, compounding the lie that the Doctor is Doc Holliday. Oh, and then it's brilliant because he gets the gun out and Doc Holliday's shot the gun out of Seth Harper's hand. Now, would they have heard the shot from up the stairs? It doesn't matter. But it's brilliant. And then Hartnell decides he's got no choice but to join in, which is great. Because he immediately sort of starts acting the part. But I like that little rapport that he has with, and this is brilliantly shot as well. We've got him and her at the bar behind the high shot of Holiday and Dodo there. And I like this little rapport that Hartnell has with Sheena Marsh, where he's sort of going, so what should I do now? And she's going, I'll tell you what to do. He goes, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. And the performance is very clever at suggesting he's kind of asking her advice, and then he's implementing her advice with all authority that he can muster, which I think is lovely comedy. And actually, there's nice double acts in this, aren't there? He does that very well with her, and we have Dodo and Doc Holliday being rather super in this as well. Shane Rimmer is very good. Shane Rimmer, I think, is very authentic. Another lovely high shot, and I like the way they both enter like the real deal. And I love the way... Yes, this is what I mean about Cotton's first Doctor, is that he's slightly clueless. He gets into trouble because he doesn't quite pick up, because he's this, which is a sort of way of making him alien. The temptation with the Doctor often is to make you go, I've landed in this place and I know all about it. If this was Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, she'd have gone, oh, brilliant, you're Wyatt Earp, you did this, that and t'other. Whereas Tom Baker would even go, yes, yes, it was a time of, and these do that. Whereas, Pert would go, Wyatt Earp happens to be a personal friend of mine. That's not what John Pertwee sounds like. But Hartnell, as written by Donald Cotton, sort of goes, who are all these people? And I'm not sure I understand how to behave in front of them, which is as legitimate a portrayal of this alien time traveller as any. And I think it's funnier than... the Doctor sort of knowing everything. And I also think it's slightly less sort of earnest as well than the idea that, the Doctor travels around, remembers everything and knows everybody. And I much prefer, I think I've said this before, I much prefer the accidental traveller, the person who saves worlds and universes, not because they're special, but because... they have a sense of humour, but also a desire to do what is right with often the scantest means at their disposal. Because that, I think, appeals... I think one has more of an in there with a character that is like that than one of some sort of lofty know-it-all, some omniscient wiseacre. Not that I think you can have... Hartnell's Doctor like Donald Cotton's vision of him all the time. It wouldn't. I don't think the series would work. But I think it's a nice, to steal a phrase, holiday for the Doctor, for him to be this sort of slightly accidental tourist. These two are great. I totally believe that Kate and Holiday are an item, and a squabbling item at that. I really like the dynamic that Dodo brings to them. I think this is Jackie Lane's best performance and best story, and I buy this dynamic. I love the little look Sheena Marsh is giving there, that she's sort of she enjoys the game, really. She enjoys the play. She's kind of jealous of Dodo, but she's not really, because she knows that Doc will always go back to her. But and Kate's a great character as well. In this, what is often portrayed as a man's world, we've got a really sassy female guest character here who has real agency, and is very useful to the plot and to the character, and has a lot of spark. And I've got a real soft spot for Richard Beale there as Batmastis, and I'm so glad we got him for the commentary, and I was able to spend a bit of time in his orbit. A very interesting man. He was with my agent for a bit, actually, with my former agent, one of my former agents, but I think we're still going at 96. Yeah, good man. And he's written a book, actually, Richard Beale, about his time in the Navy. So if you want to read a book that he wrote a couple of years before he died, from a Doctor Who actor, but that has nothing to do with his theatrical work at all. It's called, I think it's called One Man's War, something like that. I've got it. And it's Richard Beale writing about his time at sea. And that's all. I always think it's nice to read about people outside their Doctor Who work. Now, here is William Herndl, who... it's Fade to Black, isn't it? That's where you would have had adverts for foreign sale. William Herndl as Ike Clanton, I met a number of times. I didn't talk about him last time, did I? I reserved him for this time. But actually, I'll talk about him when we see him. Again, there's loads going on there with that card game. She flourishes it, and she thinks she's won. He flourishes it, and the whole thing is done. And she's slightly surprised, and he's beaten her, but then she takes that defeat well. And now, they've got a little bit of banter, but then he really sort of snarls at her. It's a really layered and well-performed dynamic that Doc and Kate have. And as I say, in that card game, it was all done through facial expression, which is two actors knowing they've got to keep going while the song plays out. And they fill the picture with performance, and I love that, which you don't get so much in today when you can edit round stuff, and you've got more sort of camera angles at your disposal, and you can tighten things. This is sort of done in real time, and so it's up to the actors to drive the pace, to keep the audience interested. And as an actor myself, I find that I admire that when it is done with great skill or invention or imagination, or in that sense, just a little bit of sort of witty invention. I like that because I can imagine how fun that must have felt to come up with it and to know that you've sort of done the job. Beautiful to have a scene set at night. Lovely lighting here, and I think is this where Wyatt comes in, and we have a scene. Yeah, we have a scene between two guest characters, but who've got a great history between them. It's actually, I think, Rex Tucker shoots this really nicely. I think his pacing is occasionally off, and the tone is slightly uneven in places. But I think his picture compositions... I mean, Rex Tucker was going to be producer of Doctor Who. I remember it was always the thing... Well, it was once a thing in Doctor Who magazine where they in Gallifrey Guardian or something, they said, did you know that the original producer of Doctor Who was going to be Rex Tucker, and he did eventually direct the show, and it was the Gunfighters, the worst story ever, because that was sort of peddled everywhere. Rex Tucker was also great friends with Hugh David, who directed The Highlanders and Fury from the Deep, and was offered, according to Hugh David, the part of Doctor Who, and that's luster is added to that suggestion by the fact that if Rex Tucker was in charge, his good mate Hugh David, who was an actor in a thing called Knight Errant, but he would have aged up because he was a much younger man. But yeah, Tucker ended up not being producer of Doctor Who, but still manages to enter the annals of Doctor Who history by directing 4 episodes, but being credited on only 3 of them. So obviously it didn't end particularly happily. Anyway... So I suppose the fact that it was a production that had various not great things going on with it, also compounded the sort of fan view and those early historians not liking it. I love the fact that because he's a bit of a Bible basher, isn't he, old Wyatt? But he's not a real Puritan because he's been nicking Doc's whiskey and then he takes it with him, and again, this is good work by these actors because I believe in their relationship, and I mean I think Doc Holliday, and this is I think they're both great, but I think Doc's a great creation because he's sort of likable, but you never forget for a minute that he's actually got an angry streak and a rage streak and a he would rather dispassionately gun you down if he needed to. So he's a sort of likable rogue, but with a real sort of edge of danger about him. So here's Bill Herndl, who I know got on very well with Peter Purvis, and I visited Bill at his flat in Camden, which was the flat he lived in when he was doing the Gunfighters, and he still owned. And as I say, we'd not managed to track him down when we were doing the DVD, but I did manage to get hold of him. I sent it to this flat's address, and his brother Colin was living there, and called me, I think, and said, Bill's going to be back from Thailand, and he'll give you a call. And Bill actually called me when I was about 50 yards from his flat in a cafe interviewing Jaina Carpenter from Dalek, and I got this call and thought, well, I'll take that later. And I listened to the answer phone message, and it was Bill Herndl. And then I went to see him a couple of weeks later, and it was literally on the doorstep of where I'd first. So when he called me, I could have just gone and knocked on his door. But what an interesting life. He married a witch. I think he was married about 5 times. He inherited millions of pounds from an art dealer that he was a sort of factotum for, but then ended up losing loads of money on behalf of 2 investors who tried to buy an island that was going to be a nudist island that got infected with nuclear wastewater. And he was also the sort of personal shopper for Errol Flynn's wife, and spent a bit of time on the French Riviera with Errol Flynn, and actually saw Errol Flynn play chopsticks on the piano with not his fingers, shall we say, like that. And you wouldn't want to shoot that pianist, because of the size of his weapon would probably bring tears to your eyes. So what an interesting fellow William Herndl was. And actually he told me a lot of this off mic, because he wanted me to check it was all right. And so then when I came to record, it kind of wasn't as good as the first time he'd done it. So I witnessed that, really. And then I got him into the 50th at the XL, or was it the 52nd? It may have been the 52nd at the XL, and introduced him to Nick Briggs and Barnaby Edwards, and they very kindly chatted to him, and I think he felt a bit special that he'd been that I'd got him a couple of tickets for the thing. So he was one of the more interesting people I met. It's a real shame he wasn't on the DVD commentary, and he's since died. As I say, Bill, Sheena Marsh and Shane Rimmer all died in the same year, which wasn't that long ago, only 2 or 3 years ago. So it would have been lovely to have got all those guys back together on camera. I love this. Hartnell is so good. Mr. Werp is brilliant. I love John Alderson's sort of slightly resigned weariness to the stupidity of his of his charge. And people keep giving me guns, and I do wish they wouldn't. I love that. I love the sort of comic interplay between Hartnell and John Alderson and Anthony Jacobs, Hartnell and Anthony Jacobs and Sheena Marsh is really, really lovely, and I think would perhaps be more celebrated were they not surrounded by some really not great acting from, and bless him, Bill was a mercurial character and an interesting guy, but he was no actor really. And I think he kind of knew it as well. He was as I say, he got lots of work because he was a networker. I mean, I got the impression on the French Riviera and in Thailand, he kind of, he introduced himself to powerful people and said, "I could be so good for you," kind of thing, and sort of, lived his life that way as a bit of a sort of networker and a doer. And in those days, you could sort of bluff your way into an acting profession. But look, he doesn't know how to stand, and he certainly doesn't know how to speak. He looks good, though. I mean, the costumes are all great, and there's some wonderful publicity photos of of all of the cowboy guys. They had a couple of good photo sessions in publicity for the Gunfighters. So this wasn't a story that was apologized for. And actually, it's a pretty decent production. And look, you've got a horse in the studio. I mean, that's not on film either. This is they've got he's so incensed that they've got his operating chair. Now, this, it's always... why isn't Shane Rimmer playing one of the Clantons? Because he is so much better than any of them, and he's about to get killed in episode 2. And he nearly takes the bar with him there, doesn't he? And I love the way that Anthony Jacobs tips his hat. And I love the way that Charlie is such a craven shite, because I'd forgotten about that. It's not sort of made explicit, although it does end up costing him his life. That he kind of sucks up to everybody and then betrays everybody, and yes, pays the price. But that's not till next week. Did he smack her bottom then? Oh dear. But that's the kind of thing. I'm sure far worse things happened in the Wild West. And yeah, about now, Marshall. Yeah, so Hartnell's very good at slipping rather effortlessly between the sort of jolly comedy and the stark seriousness of the situation. And that's again, this is quite a small studio, and you've got that shot shooting through from the from the marshal's office into the street with all of these extras. This is very well orchestrated. Look at that. That's great. That's a brilliant shot. There's a man with a magnificent hat there. I've not noticed him before. I don't think I've seen it on the big screen. I've just seen I suppose he must have been suggestion that he was I think it was some sort of sombrero. Is there a Mexican vibe going on there? Again, it's another curious sort of way, because they have to kind of make way for the song to come in to do the coda, but then to also finish. So everyone has to do a sort of bit of business. But I quite like that pan from Bat to Wyatt to the Doctor, and Hartnell acting away in close up as he'd shown Peter Purvis to do, have your hands up close to your collarbone or your face, because that's what the camera will do. And those, everyone gets a lovely close up. It's so jolly. It's fun, isn't it? I mean, the whole way that Kate manipulates the mistaken identity part of it, the banter of what's going on upstairs, the fact that Doc's able to contribute by shooting the gun out of Seth Harper's hand, and so that makes them all think, oh my god, that this old geezer's a brilliant shot, and the way that's later's going to be the game's going to be given away, isn't it, by Charlie? And so it's the whole sort of, because the Romans is written up as a farce, but there's lots of farcical elements to this, with the mistaken identity and the people saying one thing and meaning another, and misunderstandings being compounded and blah de blah. But it's a farce with slightly loftier ambitions, maybe, but also a very naughty and punny sense of humour as well. Now, I don't think... Don't Shoot the Pianist. I mean, that's a great title. A Holiday for the Doctor, which is, of course, A Holiday for the Doctor, and Don't Shoot the Pianist are brilliant episode titles, which we would expect from the man who did the Mythmakers with Small Profit, Quick Return. And I wish... I'm sure he wanted to call episode 1 Zeus Ex Machina, which is such a good joke and ties in with what... look, I'll do the Mythmakers later at some point. I love the Mythmakers. I think it's so witty and such fun. And again, with all of the humour of that, he does capture the sort of grime of ancient Greece and Troy, and the he doesn't romanticize these guys at all. You could tell they've all got dirty fingernails, and they probably all smell, and and the sort of cheapness of life in these situations. So the laughter is never far away from a gruesome death, and that's quite an odd sort of mix, isn't it? That's there's a dissonance to that, which I find really sort of interesting, because it's asking you to laugh at some highfalutin or sometimes quite sort of crass jokes. But it's sort of, but everyone's sort of, but it's also sort of grimy and grim and deathly and horrible. And of course, both stories, give up the comedy about 10 minutes into episode 4 and go for a sort of bloodbath. It's curious, and yeah, I think it worked. And dissonance is what Doctor Who is all about, actually. You never want a story to give you what you expect, and some of the, I've talked about this before, the dissonance is at the heart of Doctor Who, a ramshackle blue box that lands in front of a period setting where it sticks out, or a spectacular space setting where it sticks out, but in a totally different way. And that's what I love about Doctor Who, is placing the familiar in unfamiliar surroundings, and the ripples, dramatic ripples, character ripples, humorous, jokey ripples that all come from that. Now, I don't think Martin is choosing one particular thing. That's fine. I mean, there's not a league table for happy times and places, because if there was, I would be, it would not reflect well on me. I don't score very often. And it's sort of, what I like about this is people take the brief and do what they will with it. But I still must choose a favourite thing per episode, and see if it chimes with anything that Martin is gonna give me. And I think, interesting, is it too loose to say I liked watching that this time, which was quite refreshing for me, actually, and not something that had particularly occurred to me before, although obviously it had subconsciously, is I like the comic interplay. I like the relationships between those I highlighted particularly. Jacobs and Marsh, Jacobs and Alderson. I believe those relationships. But Hartnell rises to it too. And he's obviously got a good rapport with these actors, because I love that sort of stuff he does with Kate, where he's going, and what should I do now? And then I love that people keep giving me guns and I do wish they wouldn't, which I think is a gorgeous line. And I just love that the way that the actors are taking those relationships and illustrating them, sometimes just with facial expressions, as with that card game that comes out of that first fade to black, but sometimes with differing tones and the sort of the gymnastics, the verbal gymnastics that they go through in order to portray those relationships, but also dispense the comedy, which is often about timing and pacing and modulation of delivery. And you've got all of that. And at its best there, as I say, in a story where some of the acting, I think, doesn't land. And sometimes I think, sometimes the actors are trying to do it and they're not necessarily up to it. That happens sometimes. And I think that maybe happens with the Clanton brothers, where they're doing they just haven't quite got what it takes to do it as well as it needs, because it's a fight comedy in a drama and in a science fiction drama, and that's for kids and also for adults. It's the timing of that and the judging of the tone of that is easy to. I was going to say it's very hard, but you get into trouble when you say things like that. Everything is relative. But it's it's certainly very easy to muck up. It's very easy not to judge well. And I think, these highly trained, highly skilled actors who are getting this right, Alderson, Jacobs, Hartnell, and Sheena Marsh, who I don't know much about, but I think is pitch perfect in this, have all, obviously it's rehearsed and all of that, but have all worked out exactly how to, I think, judge the comic interaction and the character work so right. But also I'm going to give an honourable mention to Purvis, who I think, changes his performance of Stephen every story almost to lend the right tone to the adventure of the week, and is often the de facto leading man. He's not so much this time, but he has been on previous occasions in the Hartnell era, and he's I think he's hugely underrated, Peter Purves. I think he's a great contributor to Doctor Who, and I love him and Jackie Lane on the piano. I love when she gets pissed off with him and goes upstairs. Says, "All right, you stay and play the piano for your new friend." I really like that. I think Dodo's great in this. I think Jackie Lane might be my choice for next week, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I think this is fun. I know there are people who, and I know that I know American friends of mine. Or people I've sort of witnessed talking at conventions or asking questions at conventions. I know, and it's very different, I'm sure, if you're an American watching Brits trying to do American, especially when, I mean, they're not even good to my ear, and I'm not American. Whereas sometimes, you can be you can do an American accent that works well for a British audience, but in America you go, phew. And that's the same with the UK as well. There are UK accents that will probably land okay within an American audience, but sound a bit phony to us. I have to say, Tatiana Maslany, is it, in Orphan Black, is excellent, and the guy that plays her cousin, I haven't seen that for ages. We saw the first series and haven't seen the rest of it, and we absolutely loved it. So I don't know why we didn't follow it up. But those two are really, really good. But then you see, then you do see the occasional American show where they do a bit in the UK. And America has an honourable tradition of over-employing British actors. Actually, we've been so lucky by the way the States have been very kind to our profession, but occasionally if something's filmed over there and they haven't hired an English actor, and you go, oh, hang on, that's a bit, is that what you think we sound like? Because it's a mixture of sort of RP and Cockney, and the two don't quite gel together because they are very different things. But that said, I mean, context is all, because I remember Sons of Anarchy do a season, don't they, set in Ireland? And I was watching that and going, God, some of these Irish accents are terrible. And then actually, a lot of the actors were Irish. And it's something to do with the context. And also, probably you adapt your accent to the audience. So if you're being a Brit in an American show, Patrick Stewart does it slightly in as Picard in certainly in the early seasons of Next Generation, where he says command, whereas he would actually say command. And there's a few other words like that where maybe they've said, can you slightly Americanize some of your vowels in order that it doesn't sound too, so because that would sound too jarring or too British. So there is something about the audience that you're doing it to as well. So I think, lazy critics for me are ones that go, oh, well, so-and-so's accent was terrible. And quite often, it's always my glee to point out, well, you're actually criticising an accent that's their real accent, but you didn't know that. But that's a whole other thing. But I'm not. It's not my default mode to critique an accent, because I think often accents are picked up on for being bad when they're actually the person's accent. I think also the accent modulates depending on where the production is from or the company that actor is in, and there's all sorts of different things. But there's nothing more boring than somebody looking to criticize something and then just very quickly go, yeah, and the accents were terrible. I always think, well, I think you're just wanting to criticize this full stop, if that's your first port of call. We'll get to the accents at the end before you've got to anything else. But and I think, and certainly I think, Jacobs was an excellent voice man. John Alderson did American movies, and was pretty much, I think he was an American citizen by the end, even though he was born in London. And Rimmer is obviously Canadian, but that's good enough. So anyway, I don't know why I got onto accents, but anyway, my favourite thing is the comic interplay between those various characters that I mentioned. Martin Jameson, well, last time he had a big list, so let's see what he's got this time as his favourite things about episode 2, which, as you know, is called Don't Shoot the Pianist. And let's see what he has to say.
Wow. Well, I've just watched the second episode, Don't Shoot the Pianist, And in all honesty, I haven't really got a clue what's going on. It sort of ends with Peter Purvis from Blue Peter, who's actually really good in it. He's really, really good. And he's going to be hanged or something if William Hartnell doesn't come out or something, and he wiggles his fingers in front of his face. Anyway, it's a really mad episode because there's lots of people threatening people, and I said before that they were the Claytons. They're not. They're the Clantons. I don't know if that makes a difference. And there's a really weird bit where my dad appears at the top of the stairs, and you think, how did he get there? Because everyone else has to come along the street, but he appears at the top of the stairs. I don't know whether I missed something there. And there's some sitting around with some cards, and it's a wonderful bit where he gets the cards out and he flicks them, and he's obviously supposed to deal them in a really flash kind of gambler way. But my dad was very skilled in many things, but I don't think dealing cards was one of his. I suppose it's like actors put that they can horse ride and fence on their CVs. Maybe my dad put that he could deal cards, but he couldn't deal cards, so they had to cut out of that shot. Anyway, well, it's all terribly exciting. As I say, I haven't really got a clue what's going on, but it's all very enjoyable. And the next episode is called Johnny Ringo. So I'm gonna watch that now.
Well, that is very nice for me to hear Martin sing the praises of Peter Purvis, because again, Peter comes with a lot of baggage, and I think to a certain generation or a couple of generations, it might be easy to just watch an old Doctor and go, oh, it's got the guy from Blue Peter in it, so that's automatically compromises our ability to take it seriously. And that's no reflection on Peter. That is, well, it is a reflection on how indelibly he is in our heads as an excellent presenter of children's television and then sports programming. But he's also a really good actor, and so I'm very, very chuffed that Martin was able to watch and acknowledge that. And that we're able to publicly voice a bit of a bit of affirmation for the mighty Purvis, who will forever be remembered as an icon of television presenting. And I remember being so surprised to see that he'd been in Doctor Who. The first inkling I had was a picture of him in the Celestial Toymaker in the 20th anniversary Doctor Who Radio Times special. That's Peter Purvis. And it's a constant joy to me how good he is in it. And he referred to me as a friend of his recently, and I was extremely touched. And I think it's amazing that because he also didn't give many interviews about Doctor Who in the early days either. He wasn't snooty about it. He was really, really busy. And then he sort of said he didn't really have much to say. And I'm sure there was one point when he was attending his last convention, and he's done loads since. But he always gives good value. He's he knows exactly what is required on interviews and presentations and all of that sort of thing. He's a real pro. But he's on a personal level, he's I find it a bit weird and slightly amazing that he's nice to me and seems to like me, and has been very helpful on a couple of things. And as I say, and so it's a pleasure to see people acknowledging him, because I remember when I first saw these stories, when I got them as back in the day as bootleggers, going, wow, he's really good. And of course, you shouldn't be surprised that an actor is really good, but as I say, so much baggage. I'm not gonna shoot the presenter or the pianist. And actually, just as I was going through the computer to try and make this work, this is live. Trevor Smith, another patron, has clearly just watched episode 1 and fed back. So this is freshly minted feedback that Trevor says, wow, what a fantastic episode. What a treat to have Anthony Jacobs' son, and it's not Matthew. Hearing his memories of his dad's research for the role was really interesting. For the record, I love the Gunfighters. Great sets, great story, very funny in places, and as you quite rightly said, Toby, it's Dodo's best story. Very much looking forward to the other 3 episodes. Well, this is the first of those 3, the second of the 4, Trevor, and you have timed that perfectly, like all good pianists, to get yourself in just before the end. So we'll do a final flourish, and I'm not going to try and improvise another verse because you might want to shoot the vocalist. Until next time, goodbye. Well, welcome one and all. We're enjoying the Gunfighters here at Happy Times and Places. You darn tootin' we are. It's a joy to be doing this and getting sort of feedback live as I'm releasing one episode at a time, just because of the way that it's fallen out. I haven't had the opportunity to do the whole thing in one go, but it means that I release it over on Patreon, and it feels like I'm watching along with everybody over in that enclave of joy that is patreon.com/Toby Heddock. But that's not why I'm mentioning it. I try and leave the plugs to the end of the show. However, it's simply that this has been quite unusual because people have been joining in and going, yeah, I like this. So I was glad that Jim Smith, for example, mentioned "Let's hope the piano knows it," which is a beautiful line that I'd talked over. And we're enjoying Matthew Jacobs giving a great insight into his dad, who plays Doc Holliday, who I think is one of the strongest things about this story. And Joe Llewellyn, who's a viewer from the States, has been saying that he's been enjoying the story and that putting the bad accents to one side. So I asked Joe who he felt was doing a good job and who was doing a bad job accent-wise. I put in my 2 penneth worth. I think Anthony Jacobs, John Alderson, and Shane Rimmer, and then coming up Reed DeRuin, who was a genuine American, were the strongest, and certainly Billy and Ike were the weakest. We'll get to Johnny Ringo this episode, and Joe says, yeah, he feels that Anthony Jacobs is pretty spot on and doing the sort of Southern gentleman thing very well, and the Clanton boys are not so hot. So that's from not from the horse's mouth, but from the United States of America's mouth. So thanks to Joe for that insight. But everyone's having a good time watching it, and I'm going to continue to do that. This story that for years was, the one story you could say in the days, as I say, growing up, the idea that any old Doctor Who would be bad, it was all hallowed ground. Apart from, the Gunfighters was bad, the worst Doctor Who story ever, and there was kind of little besmirchments within write-ups of Underwater Menace was deemed to be slightly, subpar. The Space Pirates was slow. Invasion of the Dinosaurs had unsuccessful dinosaurs. Ambassadors of Death was sort of a bit choppy. Colony in Space was perhaps underwhelming for the first story to go into space of the Pertwee era. Those were the sort of little rumblings early on. Those were the ones that might have been slightly question marked. But most things were great. And then, of course, we got to that point where I remember finding a Doctor Who bulletin on the stall at a Doctor Who convention, and they'd done their poll, and it had the all-time classics and all-time clangers, and it was like a Brave New World. People make lists of the stories they think are awful. This is terribly exciting, and I revelled in those, and I read them over and over again. And then, of course, other things come out, which start, saying what's bad about the thing that you like. And you go, oh, this is really exciting. I suddenly feel all, I love, I love to sort of give a kicking to a story, especially if it's a story that everybody likes. So I would do a kick, even if just in my own head. I'd write my own guidebooks at home, where I take great joy in sort of pulling up a story that I thought had too good a reputation, but of course also sticking up for the stories everyone slagged off, because everybody slags those stories off. So let me tell you that actually they're hugely underrated. So of course I've never quite been able to give a fair and proper assessment to the Gunfighters because of my predilection to to sort of stick up for the underappreciated, to get behind the underdog, which I'm not sure is an entirely as benevolent as I probably like to think it is. I think there's a certain streak of elitism about it. Actually, going, I can see the quality in this thing that the hoi polloi slag off. So I'm not bigging myself up when I say I've always felt that the Gunfighters was good fun and better than its reputation. I do think that speaks to a little bit of my own vanity. We're complicated creatures, aren't we? And perhaps I'm delving too deep into my own psychology when thinking about Doctor Who, but I mean that could be the story of my life. Anyway, what I do know for sure is that I've been enjoying watching the Gunfighters as part of this Happy Times and Places. I hope if you've come as somebody that's used to it being slated, you've found some some kinship in this love-in, and if you're somebody that doesn't like it, the positivity that emanates from this has maybe made you a bit more sympathetic towards it. Let's see. I hope so. I hope mostly that you're just entertained and you don't think I'm a prick. That's my main aim in life. Full stop. But nothing is guaranteed. But I do my best. Anyway, let us now watch episode 3 of the Gunfighters, which is named after it's an episode that. Is named after the new character that comes in, about whom there's quite a lot to say. So we are going to press play. I'm wrangling a lot of remote controls at the moment. We're going to press play in 3, 2, 1, and it's time for Johnny Ringo. Which gives the story a sort of new lease of life with a new, fairly major presence in the story. And in fact, he is the main guest star. Lawrence Payne gets top guest billing in this. He's in it, and he's, and so, he's great. Above John Alderson, who's come over from Hollywood. So these are major castings. This is not done on the cheap. This cliffhanger looks like it's been played back from film. There we go. Now, I've been thinking about cliffhangers and reprises, because even some that are the same might have been re-recorded with the session last week and have minor differences. So I haven't compared the two. Some, of course, are reenacted. That one wasn't reenacted this week. So it was either played in from last week's or it was recorded again after last. The only thing that makes me question is I think Ike Clanton's delivery of his line is slightly different, but that could be me imagining it, because cliffhangers that we don't know remounted or alternate takes are fairly murky in the missing episodes. And in fact, I was listening to Rhys Williams, pointed there by Rick Byatt, faithful and kind and supportive patron and other things, that Galaxy 4, the reconstruction, has cliffhanger elements that we've not had released before on soundtrack or on physical media, but they're not even on the animation, because some of the soundtracks when they were recorded were sort of chopped together. And I've mused on that on the Marco Polo Too Much Informations about whether the cliffhangers and reprises we have are actually the correct ones, and I've not quite got to the bottom of that. But that's got nothing to do with this, apart from the fact that it's made me imagine. So don't write in. I'm not. It's no great mystery that it's just I suddenly thought, oh, has he delivered that line slightly differently? Because that is a possibility. But I think it's more likely that it's just last week's played in from film. Although, no, because it would have had the. I like that. I'll lay you out so cold you'll freeze. Very good. I'm going to revisit that cliffhanger. But anyway, this. So yes, I remember this because Phineas gets quite a bit more to do in the book, because he gets he gets put in jail. Phineas is the funniest of the Clanton brothers in the book. The book is very different. The book is, of course, narrated by, well, Ned Buntline, who was a real reporter, wasn't he? But that's a brilliant shot. I love that, the amount of depth of field that Tucker gets in that shot. Look at the buildings behind with what looks like a light in a top window. There's even an extra there who is possibly Chinese, which gives a bit more of a sort of accurate depiction of the sort of the human landscape, as it were, of the time, and unusual for Doctor Who at that time. So a little bit of an attention to detail. I mean, this is, I know it's in the studio, but it's night shooting. There's a sort of darkness and shadow. And isn't Charlie a prick? He comes and interferes. And you can see what David Graham is trying to do here with his, is it Walter Brennan? The kind of, oh, hey boss, I'm gonna, and has he got cotton wool in his cheeks? But you know, he's giving real character to this. That's awful. I mean, Charlie's a terrible, you know, got a gossip and trying to get in. You know, he says it. Oh, you know, I don't want you boys getting into trouble, but it's because he's, you know, he loves being involved and he loves sort of being part of it and manipulating and gossiping, which is what undoes him, as we will see later. But look at me, it's wonderfully sort of craven at the back there. It's a performance I'm not quite sure works, but I enjoy what he's doing. But I'm loving this. You know, that must be a photo blow up at the back, but you can see the lights in the windows and a wagon and everything. And sometimes when these episodes are tarted up, those backdrops look a bit phony. And I can see that one is slightly, but but I mean, that's on a massive screen and really, really tarted up. I think the design by Barry Newbury is superb. He's gone kind of mental under Herp's heavy blow. This is where Rex Tucker's writing of the extra verses, because the song was in it, but Rex Tucker, the director, decided to get some extra verses in there in order that the incidental music, you know, be the song, which divides people. I think it's absolutely fine. I love I love the fact that following a story about nightmarish versions of children's parlor games, and before a story that is a, you know, thoughtful philosophical sci-fi tale about exploitation, you've got a comedy western where the incidental music is a song. I love the way Reed Deruin decides to pay by flicking his coin and banging it on the desk. He immediately comes in with a much better accent than anybody else because he's actually American. He's also got a bowler hat on, which I love, and I just love how dirty his shirt is and things like that. You know, all these guys absolutely stink and are grotty and have got sort of grime in every pore, and he is poor Clanton. He's grime in every pore Clanton. But Reed Deruin at some point was writing a Doctor Who script with John Pertwee. He was mates with John Pertwee. But I remember, I think Peter Purvis knew Reed Deruin and had been a stage play with him. But it's funny, I get on very well with Peter Purvis, and he's a nice man and an excellent broadcaster and great to have on a commentary. But I have to limit the amount of times I correct him. It's just me sensing, because he makes quite a few statements in commentaries that aren't necessarily true, which is fine when you haven't got a moderator, and it's a bit awkward when you are the moderator, because you sort of get. And I think there was a couple of things I'd corrected him on in this, and so when he said Reed Deruin was Canadian, I'm sure he does in the commentary, I just let that go, even though I knew he was American, because I felt I'd pushed it enough. So that's one of the things nobody talks about when you're being a moderator. It's sometimes you have to, for the sake of being, you know, polite and politic, because also you don't want your whole role to be, actually I think you'll find, because that's annoying. But his next extraction's gonna be a bullet. that's one of the rare somebody addresses a camera in Doctor Who. I mean, that's up there with the bootstrap paradox, and not even the sonic screwdriver will get us out of this one. Nobody talks about Charlie the barman breaking the fourth wall. A lot of high-angle camera shots. This is beautiful stuff, though. Look how high those steps go as well. This is a really good production in a way. And look, another high angle. These cameras are beautiful. Dodo in a hat. I love Dodo in a hat. Why doesn't everyone think this story is brilliant? I absolutely love it. Aside from whether the comedy is judged correctly or not, it's again, this is the story after the Celestial Toymaker and before the Savages. What a rich and varied template the show had under Wiles and Tosh, really sort of stretching. I know that they're not the credited producer and script editor on this, but they are the sort of people who developed it. And it's the end of Donald Cotton, who there's been a really good article about in Doctor Who magazine recently, and there's an excellent documentary online which really delve into him, and in many ways I sort of almost wish they hadn't, because you delve into anybody's life and there's triumph and disaster, and the disaster makes me so sad. I always worried about Dodo in this one as well. She always looks to me like she's had a flu jab in her arm, because there's a sort of smudge of dirt on the top of her arm shirt, and I always think, oh, she looks like she's bleeding. That's great. I bumped into an old friend. He kind of lost his appetite. I mean, could you eat somebody's supper who you know's just been shot? I think that's really grim. It's the sense of humour is quite sort of. The spectre of death resides over it. Every joke is sort of flecked with the blood of the dead, which the westerns were quite often sort of quite romantic stories. When I was younger, it was only when you grew up and watched the sort of the slightly dirtier ones, and the more morally complex ones, that you go. It certainly took me a while to realise that the Wild West was quite as. I think maybe my early understanding of it was, the lawmen always beat the baddies, But actually, there's great moral complexity in the good westerns, isn't there? I mean, we did High Noon at university, and that's the wonderful film about everybody walking out on the knackered old Gary Cooper, and him then, and that story is that the story of that is nothing really. It's just a series of betrayals. It's wonderful sort of character stuff, and that's got the song, hasn't it? Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. It was odd because I wouldn't often choose to watch a western, and there's some absolutely fantastic westerns. Now, Johnny Ringo is an absolute. I was going to use a rude word there, but he is. He's horrible. He's very cool the way he smokes a black cheroot. He's very sexy. I think Lawrence Payne is has a real presence. He's very handsome, and he's all in black, and I think he's got black leather trousers, and I think that's a look that if you can pull it off, you're doing very, very well. This part was offered to Patrick Troughton, which would have been complicated, wouldn't it? Troughton as Johnny Ringo, would he then have been able to be cast as Doctor Who? I mean, I know Freema Agyeman appears in the very next story, but that's different landscape, different circumstances. I don't think it would have put them off if they'd really wanted him, but it would have been the Maxil of the 60s. But it would have made this story have a different complexion. It would always be that one that's got the Doctor in it before he's the Doctor. And I always don't like that, because when he says it's on the house and he goes, I never figured different, and you sort of go, but fancy there that bit. Fancy being that guy that you can just walk into a place and get free drinks, or you'll kill people. I mean, come on, the Wild West. That's a bit mean. Well, and of course, he then makes Charlie nervous. I mean, I know Charlie's a prick, but he makes Charlie nervous. So Charlie just goes, "Oh, I can't wait." But that also that's Charlie's subconscious speaking, that he probably would go and tell Wyatt Earp. But this is pretty grim. And nice bit of business where he's holding the bottle. May as well have drunk that. And that's really, really cruel and horrible. It's curtains for Charlie. The jokes here are pretty harsh. Doctor Who's always sort of made you feel the weight of individual deaths. This doesn't undermine them, although it's sort of comedic in a sense, but it's comedic and grim. It's pretty unpleasant stuff. Charlie the barman has gotten a shroud. Or has gotten a shroud, yeah. That's pretty bad news for poor old Charlie. But it establishes Ringo as a force to be reckoned with. He's wonderful in the book. He's really pretentious and reads Latin, doesn't he? And he's got that great joke where he gets killed, which is a great joke, where he gets shot. And he says, "My ghoul has just been divided into 3 parts," which is tortuous. But it kind of, and you go, is that the whole reason you decided to make him this sort of pretentious leaf reader of Latin? I really like that. This is a great scene for Dodo, and I love the fact that Doc's sort of laughing, and then he sort of waits and takes it pretty seriously. He's always got a stray bit of moustache in the middle, which I wish they'd get rid of. That stray bit of moustache really annoys me, especially as I think it is a false moustache. It is a false moustache. I wish they'd get rid of that bit at the front. It really bothers me. It's a bit like the spittle in the Master of the Land of Fiction in The Mind Robber. Once you notice it, it never goes away. So I'm sorry if I've now given you an eye worm in the shape of a wispy bit of Doc Holliday moustache. He's wearing a hairpiece and a moustache. He was a bald man, Anthony Jacobs. I think at this stage. I'm sure Martin will correct me if I'm wrong. Everything I've seen him in, he's no hair on top, but round the sides. That I love that scene. I think that might be Dodo's best scene in Doctor Who, where she forces Doc Holliday and then leans against him with the gun. And then she's so jolly here, and then he produces the gun and goes, "I didn't want to shoot you either." So it's all this, and I mean, people don't faint in things anymore. And obviously the idea that women might faint because they're slightly overwhelmed by something is extraordinarily dated now. But I think it's very funny there, and I love that whole scene. I think that whole scene is totally charming and probably Dodo's best moment in Doctor Who, and will probably be my choice for this episode. Although, be warned, Martin has sort of been listing a number of things. He's not been going for one particular thing. That's his interpretation of the brief, and that is fine. But it means that there are going to be no winners and losers, or basically it means I am probably going to lose, but in a slightly different way to the way I normally lose. Look. Oh, yeah, and talking of accents, I don't know where in heaven's name Johnny Ringo is supposed to be, because Payne already has a slightly pinched delivery. He has a diction that has a pattern that is noticeable throughout of all of his performances. In that you can tell that it's him talking when he's playing Morix and in the Leisure Hive and Dastari in The Two Doctors. He has a certain way of pronouncing certain words that are very much his. But he's obviously trying to do an accent here. But when he goes, "Oh, Charlie, you talk too much," well, that might be his character doing an accent, putting on an accent in the same way that, we do sometimes put on accents when we say certain things. Occasionally, one might put on we do. I can't think of examples now, but there's sometimes where you go, "Oh, what a mistake of a maker," or whatever. You put on an accent, or I will sometimes say something with an Irish accent or something. Just, I don't know. It's just a sort of tick that we do, isn't it? When we're trying to say that something's not being serious, or we're just trying to say it in a slightly more frivolous way, or we're just bored and trying to make the conversation sound different. I don't know, but we do that, and that's what he might be doing when he says, "Oh, Charlie, you talk too much, huh?" But unfortunately, that doesn't help with what he's supposed to be doing the rest of the time, because he's got this sort of RSC kind of diction. He's a well-spoken, although he does have that slightly particular delivery and pronunciation that he has. on which he's trying, it seems, to overlay an American accent. I read an interview with him once where he said that when he first did it, everyone burst out laughing. And I can sort of see why. And again, not to... I do a whole monologue on accents last week. Listen to that if you can bear it. I'm not sure he's altogether successful. I love this. You've got a picture of it. Excellent marks there for John Alderson for throwing Johnny Ringo's picture away. Very good. Have I missed the bit where the doctor says the line about Doc Holliday going, he lent me a gun, he extracted my tooth, what more do you want? I love all of that. Richard Beale's doing some great cleaning his gun business there. Who in Thunder would want to kill Charlie? Oh, and Martin Huntley here as Warren Earp. Now, I've read quite a lot about the actual gunfight at the OK Corral, and an Earp brother was murdered. And it was Morgan Earp was murdered, wasn't it? And not Warren. Yes, so they've changed that up slightly, and I don't know why. Oh, a couple of cowboys. That's a nice piece of... suggests the place is slightly more populous. And you do get a sense of location here. You do get the sense that Stephen and Ringo have sort of ridden out together. I'm never entirely convinced by Johnny Ringo taking Stephen along with him, but it's quite fun. Yes, Warren Earp is Martin Huntley, who has been a Robo-Man in Dalek Invasion of Earth, and he's one of the prisoners in the Sensorites. And he told me that he didn't actually have an agent and was always done through BBC casting. So he gets 3 nice little parts in the Hartnell era, but had a family and ended up selling insurance, he told me. And we got him in for the Sensorites for part 6 for the commentary. We didn't need him for this one because the Gunfighters was one that had a load of people still alive from at that point. And they did. Before my time was Dalek Invasion of Earth, but that still had quite a number of cast. So, the only opportunity we got to talk to him was on part 6 of the Sensorites, and he's turned down opportunities to do stuff since. So we got him then, and as I say, he's not really agreed to do anything before or since. So he's given the time again, I think we'd got him in front of a camera and got him to tell us about everything. But you do what you can at the time. I sort of buy that these two have a history as well. Sheena Marsh is really appealing to me this time around. I've looked at other things when I've looked at the story in the past, but I think she's key to this story, and she's obviously an important part, but the way that she plays against Anthony Jacobs and William Hartnell in that scene I enjoyed last time, and now Lawrence Payne here, is kind of key, and she's very sort of flirty and sassy, and but without being glib. I think Sheena Marsh is excellent, and she never, sadly, sort of responded or played ball when approached. Just one of those people that didn't want to talk for whatever reason. Sometimes people think they're not interesting. Sometimes people aren't interested. It's whatever. That's not a way to chat people up, Johnny Ringo. If a lady doesn't do what you want, don't point a gun in her face, or maybe do. Whatever works for you. But yeah, he's suddenly made the thing seem a little bit darker. I remember Phineas in the book being quite fun, and Shane Rimmer reads the audiobook because it's written, in the American idiom, and is closer in some ways to historical facts because, as I'm sure we will discuss next week, the actual gunfight in the OK Corral, only Billy Clanton was killed, and there were and Frank and Jack McClary, the McClary brothers, who do make an entrance in the book, but this is a sort of simplified version, and you don't have to be too hard on historical fact when you're doing Doctor Who as a comedy western. Right on the desk. His accent's not actually bad, and he's very sweet as the. Oh, he's very sort of rangy, isn't he? A rangy physique. Tall. Oh, that's so sad. Poor old Warren. It's a curious one though, because he's a character we've only just met. And it's horrible, isn't it, that one of them shouts "Yahoo!" as they've just killed a man, a very young man as well, which is very sad. He's not quite dead yet, is he? Because you get some last words next week. It's a curious way to end the episode on the sort of death of a character we've only just met, and then we go into next week, which has all sorts of things going on behind and in front of the camera. But I think that was a good episode, because sometimes episode 3 can be a bit meandery, but you've introduced a new threat, and springing the Clanton brother at the end as well. It means that they're on course to do what the next episode promises, which is the OK Corral. If you're selling yourself short, you should call it the Splendid Corral. Very good, the Tremendous Corral. I was always a bit sad when I first watched this, that because the Clanton brothers always get the first line of dialogue in every episode except next week, but that's because they cut the recap, but that's after they've done the credits, that people like John Alderson and Lawrence Payne aren't higher up the credits, because of course then it was all done in order of appearance bar the Doctor. But that means that sometimes, like episode 3 of The Underwater Menace, Zaroff gets second billing, which seems so right, even though it's just an accident of his appearance. I'm not going to talk about the credits. This is the last time, though, Rex Tucker is credited on an episode of Doctor Who. We shall talk about why next week, when we're all on film. So interesting. I enjoyed that. I definitely think my favourite part is the scene between Dodo and Doc Holliday, where she persuades him to take her back, and they have that little face-off, and then it's revealed that he could have shot her at all time anyway. So that's all good. What does Martin Jameson, Holby City and BBC Radio scriptwriter and son of Doc Holliday himself, Anthony Jacobs, think about episode 3?
Wow, I've just finished watching episode 3, Johnny Ringo, and it's very dark. I mean, the body count, all sorts of people are getting killed. The Charlie, the barman, who was really good, somebody called Graham. He's actually one of the better actors in it. He gets killed, although he gets shot and then by a six-shooter and then falls forward, which is obviously, physically impossible. But anyway, he that's what he does, and he dies, and it's terribly sad because we lose one of the better actors. And then there's a lynching, and Peter Purvis is going to be hanged, and there's a whole thing going on with my dad and Dodo Dupont, and it's like, wow, what on earth is going on there? It's like really dodgy. And there's a man with a stammer is being humiliated. I mean, it's so great. This was shot before the days of Health and Safety Gone Mad. No, it isn't. That's me being ironic. Do not cancel me. Anyway, it's very dark. I still haven't got a clue. Johnny Ringo's appeared, and he's after some people, and there are some people after some people, and they come in, they shoot Wyatt Earp's brother. I mean, honestly, I used to think that I would struggle with Stephen Moffat's scripts, right? I hadn't a clue what was going on, but wow, they are clear as day compared to this. I have not got a clue, but I'm going to watch the final episode. I have to say, to be fair, there is a thing which is great, which is that it's kind of dirty. The cowboys, they speak with these sort of semi-English accents, but they've got grime on them, which I like, and Peter Purvis is in a sort of like a fancy dress costume. But, wow, it's kind of trippy. So I'm now going to watch the final episode which is called the OK Corral. So this is going to be great. Oh yeah, the other thing is the Doctor. It's hardly in it. He it's not really. Where are these old Doctor Who's like this, where the Doctor doesn't really appear? He's kind of turns up every now and again and does some kind of quaint old guy stuff. I used to think he was scary, but he's kind of this old guy, and he turns up every now and again and says some stuff, but he's nothing to do with the story. That's also really odd. So I'm going to watch the last episode now, and I'm very excited about it.
Ha! Well, if you think he does nothing this week, you wait till next week, Martin. Martin name-checked Mr. Graham there playing Charlie the barman, so as I know that Martin will listen to this, and probably before I have time to talk to him, because I'll just send him the files, it's not just any old Mr. Graham, it's Peppa Pig's granddad, David Graham, who's also the voice of the Daleks in the 60s, and also Professor Kerensky in the Doctor Who story City of Death, but most famously, the voice of Parker from Thunderbirds. So that is maybe why you enjoyed his performance so, Martin. He's a bloomin' legend, and still doing Peppa Pig from his bedroom in Hampstead. He's suffered a stroke recently, but is still working into his 90s. Is he 96, 97? Maybe a bit younger than that, actually. But he's still going strong and delivering a performance propped up and from home. But good for him. What a legend. And his Charlie, as I say, I'm not sure it's a performance that massively works for me, even though I applaud the sentiment behind it. But he's supposed to be, slightly annoying and that kind of. So fine. And as for Phileas's stammer, well, that was introduced by Maurice Good. Just I think because there's not much to differentiate the three Clanton brothers. They are slightly better drawn in the book, I would say, and I don't think it helps that Bill is the sort of intemperate youngster, and there's a few lines that sort of acknowledge that, and he's the sort of hothead, and he shoots the bottles, doesn't he, in episode 1 in the bar, and he's a bit of an arse, and there's there's a great exchange next week, isn't there, when he goes, I never took you for a back shooter, Ringo, and Johnny Ringo goes, I never took you for any kind of shooter, Billy, which I can't like, but you can see with and Maurice Good is has come in as the actor of the three of the Clanton brothers, who's just had a big stage success as perhaps the one with the most heft. So he's probably got, can I stick something in here to make me stick out, so that the Clanton brothers aren't too anonymous, especially as bless William Herndl for all he's trying. He's not making much of an impact as Ike. So it's the actor throwing in a stutter, which in those days was a bit of a nod for character. I don't see them particularly that it's doing that to make a victim of him or anything like that. Nobody has a go at Phileas for having a stutter particularly. It's just there for a bit of business. And as somebody who has a bit of a stammer myself, I don't take it personally, so I don't mind that. And I think I think not everything is offensive, even if it's something that if I chose to, I could take offence to. But it interests me that sort of Martin finds the story confusing, because it's very hard, isn't it, when you're a Doctor Who fan and you know this stuff like the back of your hand. I kind of take it for granted. I could explain the plot of this to you, but I have seen it hundreds of times. I mean, I have, well, not literally hundreds of times, but I've seen it tens of times. I've seen it over 20 times, I should think. Yeah, for sure. And of course, I've read the book, and I've read the Doctor Who archives, and I've read the story now. Blah, 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 blah. But coming to it once, I'm surprised, and it's, but Martin is a scriptwriter and a very experienced and skilled one. But this seems to me to be perfectly straightforwardly plotted. Any oddness about it is sort of style and genre. rather than. But it's a bit like when Nicholas Parsons is on the commentary for the Doctor Who story, The Curse of Fenric, on the DVD, and he goes, well, of course, none of this makes any sense, but the Doctor Who fans, they make it all make sense. And you're wanting to go, no, this makes perfect sense. All of this is happening for a reason. And it's a bit of, poor old, I feel sorry for Ian Briggs, who's, plotted it to the hilt and gone, and these monsters, and this is their back history, and they're rising from the sea here because of this, and this. And Nicholas Parsons just going, yeah, I'm sure it's all just some sort of crazed, accidental smorgasbord of weird ideas flung. No, he's laboured really hard to make that work. So I sometimes struggle with some of the how some of the time paradoxy stuff works in the Moffat scripts, sure, but they're almost designed to make you sort of want to wrangle them and piece them together, and they're intricate jigsaws, and they're sort of there's a deliberate abstraction about those sometimes, but it surprises me that Martin is not finding this as easy to follow. But again, I have the luxury of knowing this stuff like the back of my hand, and I think we forget that sometimes as Doctor Who fans, that we are very fluent in a language that lots of people might not be. But I do take the point about the Doctor sort of coming in and out. But I think Donald Cotton's Doctor is very different to other Doctors. But that's what's very interesting about the series as a whole, in that a different writer can come in and have a different idea about how the Doctor should behave. I mean, different producers come in, and under John Wiles, who had gone by the time that this was on, but had been the producer when this story was commissioned. I mean, there are John Wiles episodes where Hartnell comes in towards the end of the Dalek Master Plan. Hartnell, comes in 5 minutes before the end of the episode for a couple of scenes, and is hugely underused. And the Celestial Toymaker, which has just gone, he's missing for the middle 2 episodes, apart from his hand and some dubbed dialogue. I mean, that was so he could have a holiday, but a real holiday for the Doctor. But when it was being done 48 weeks a year, and you've got a leading man who's not in the best of health, he's not as central sometimes, but there's an added detachment with Cotton, who makes him this slightly sort of bewildered onlooker, which is really going to happen next week, when the massive final film sequence does not require. In fact, the Doctor's not on film at all for any of this. So the guest stars are used for much of the filming, which is where a lot of those pictures that we have, which really concentrate on the Clanton brothers and Doc and those guys. There's a brilliant shot of Ike on the top of the stairs that's got Ken Westbury, the cameraman, in. So we've got lots of lovely film camera work to see next week. But I'm glad Martin is enjoying it. He did mention a couple of things that I picked out. The grime, which I think is lovely and authentic and very nice, although I still am bothered by Dodo's flu jab. That still makes my arm ache slightly. And that scene between Dodo and the Doc, which I didn't think was dodgy. That was fun. It was fun. She was trying to manipulate him to take her back, and he sort of sensed that he really didn't mind her doing it, because he kind of agreed, but he didn't have to, and there's a little sort of game of etiquette there about I kind of want to go back, but I'm going to have to make this woman's going to have to threaten me with a gun, and I'm going to have to give her my word, and then I'll sort of do it. And that opens up the sort of the story dynamics between him and Kate and Johnny, and that leads us to where we get to at the end, which is all lovely. So I think that's a great episode. It's certainly a good episode 3 as well, which has that slightly different dynamic of sexy Johnny Ringo and his bad guy's leather trousers. Dodo in a hat. Love Dodo in a hat. So, well done. My favourite thing was that scene between Dodo and Doc, which is also, I think, my favourite scene for Dodo. And we lost Jackie Lane last year, and I met Jackie Lane on a train, and she's this sort of enigmatic figure, and she's not great in most of her Doctor Who, and it's lovely to see when she's given something to do. She has a lot of fun with it, and she's only 4 episodes. No, sorry, she's 8 episodes time, she's got one more story. Stephen goes next time, and then she goes halfway through the following story. So, she's on her way. Has she been fired by now? Does she know? No, because I'm sure Peter says that he was told at very, very late notice, and I know Innes Lloyd sends Jackie a sort of apology going, you were the sort of victim of circumstance, but I know that she didn't feel that was quite enough, and that she'd been slightly messed about, and I think she was, and I think it was tough being a companion in Doctor Who in those days, because Maureen O'Brien got rather unceremoniously dumped. Peter wasn't wild about the speed with which he was sort of got rid of, and the way that it was done. And then Jackie, and then their replacements, Michael Craze and Annika Wills, come in, loads of promise. Fraser Hines turns up, and it's right, you guys can get lost, and actually well before your contract is over. And again, essentially in episode 2 of your finals, I know they come back for a film sequence in episode 6, but they're essentially hoiked out of the door. It's show, but I think of modern show business as being very cruel and unkind, but even in the sort of not particularly rarefied atmosphere of a weekly tea time serial on the BBC in 1966, 66, life was cruel. It was like the Wild West. We get romantic about it, but actually there's a lot of specks of blood over all the things that we like to look at. And on that thought, it's curtains for this episode. I hope you've liked it. This sort of improvisation makes me sound like I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I don't even know why I brought up the cliffhanger reprise, which I think it was just something in William Herndl's delivery of the line that made me think, oh, is that different to how I'm used to it? And of course it wasn't. It's exactly the same, because it's the same take. It is the footage from last week. I just had a little bit of a sort of brain fart going, oh, is that a thing? And then, of course, enunciated that, because if something comes into my head, I seem compelled to say it out loud. I then tied myself up in knots over something that if I just had the courage of my convictions and gone, no, it's last week's footage, played into this week, as quite often happened, and that's the case here. So I think you'll find there's nothing for you to tell me I think I'll find, because I think you'll find that I've already found. I'd already found it. I'd never lost it. I didn't need to even go a-looking. But there we go. I just have very tiresome mental thought processes that compel me to then indulge in very tiresome verbal outpourings. You only have to listen to it. I have to be it. Well, hello and welcome. It's come sun up, and so we have a date at the OK Corral, not only geographically but also nominatively, geographically and nominatively. We are at the OK Corral, the final episode of the Doctor Who story, The Gunfighters. Our guide is somebody who has a personal stake in it, whose DNA exists within the it's not celluloid, is it? But I'm watching on DVD, so within the pixels that I am watching, because his dad was Doc Holliday, Anthony Jacobs, fine actor, and who is, I think, one of the best things about the Gunfighters, the much maligned Doctor Who story. I've sort of mentioned from memory my what I've taken away in the back recesses of my brain of what the celebration, Doctor Who, a celebration, said about the Gunfighters, which that and the Radio Times 20th anniversary special, both of them gave the suggestion that this was the bad Doctor Who story. As I say, there were others that got the odd little bit of if not a knocking, but certainly a any praise came with a qualification that, the fish people weren't that great, or the space pirates was a bit slow, or whatever. But the Gunfighters was bad. The 20th anniversary Radio Times special said the Doctor came up with poorly drawn versions of Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and Bat Masterson. Which was, they were much pithier, those reviews in the Radio Times 20th anniversary special. But again, everything was pretty much positive, but you were allowed to be mean about the Gunfighters. I think because there was also a feeling that it had got the lowest viewing figures, which actually it didn't. I think maybe that myth came slightly afterwards. But there were various things about why the Gunfighters was not loved, but it was mostly to do with the very small number of people were writing about Doctor Who at that time, and that's the consensus that seemed to have been reached, and it's one it's never quite shaken off, which I think is interesting in and of itself. And as I say, I find it very difficult to be objective about the story because it has always been haunted by that. I had not had a chance to formulate my own view of it until I watched it, where I was either going to, go with the received wisdom or react against it. But either way, I wasn't starting from zero, as it were. So anyway, The Gunfighters, Serial Z, by Donald Cotton, director Rex Tucker. If ever reviewers feel tempted to pour scorn on the attempts by America to emulate British costume drama, a good lesson in humility would be learned from studying this serial as a demonstration of how the British cannot do westerns. It was billed as a show about the gunfight at the OK Corral, but it was more the massacre of the OK Corral. This is Jeremy Bentham, a wise and learned man who's responsible for a lot of what we knew about Doctor Who in the early days, and was a fastidious and early chronicler, and a very clever man, a learned gentleman, a nice chap, who has since revised his opinion, by the way. And we're all allowed to change our mind. I mean, some of you listeners are less, are younger than this opinion was, and you've changed a lot since then. So we will. I'm not blaming Jeremy when I'm reading this out. It's just it created such an indelible impression on me. I thought it important to read it out, and it has the picture of Hartnell with Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp and Stephen and Dodo. It says, an unlikely-looking Dr. William Hartnell in The Gunfighters, which has been described as the poorest Doctor Who story. So badly was this show received by the public that its audience viewing figures dipped below the horizontal axis line on the ratings graph in the Doctor Who producer's office for the only time in the programme's history. I'm not sure that's true, and I don't even know what the horizontal axis line on the ratings graph is. And as we've since discovered, there were other stories that got lower viewing figures. What made this serial so poor is the cumulative effect of so many bad points, which on their own would be forgiven in most other stories. The script was pure Talbot Rothwell. I didn't know what that meant. It was only when I saw stuff about the Carry On films later on that I realised Talbot Rothwell was a writer for Carry On. The acting was not even bad vaudeville, and the direction was more West Ham than West Coast. Okay, I thought he was saying the acting was more West Ham than West Coast, which makes sense because West Ham acting. I mean, it's a tortuous, but it, yeah. So the acting's not even bad vaudeville. I don't agree with that. And the direction is more West Ham than West Coast, which isn't then even a pun on hammy acting. So I don't know what the, I think for a sense and accuracy have been sacrificed for a bon mot there, Jeremy. It was not good, it was bad, and it was ugly. I see what you've done there. I didn't at the time, funnily enough. It took me ages to go, oh, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what he's done there. It's not good, it was bad, and it was ugly. But then again, for years, I knew there was a shop called W.H. Smith, and I didn't think I'd ever seen one. And I would walk down the high street in Newbury, where my grandma lived, and walk past that shop called Wurstmouth and think that's a really weird name for a shop. And it took me several years to suddenly, when my brain coalesced, went, oh, W.H. Wurstmouth, that shop I can't pronounce and don't know why it's got that stupid name, is W.H. Smith. So, I'll forgive myself for being slow. Just as Doctor Who fandom has been slow for its brain to coalesce around the magnificence of the Gunfighters. It was certainly the story that decided in the mind of new producer Innes Lloyd that the time had come to rethink the policy of using historical stories in Doctor Who's framework. I don't know if is that entirely true? I think that might be a bit of 2 and 2 together to make 5. I certainly see that has made its way onto IMDb as a fact, which has automatically made me turn against it, because a lot of things that... Yeah, anyway, let's not get into that. I've had a look at my notes for the DVD commentary as well, because I have the production file, but it's on a very slow computer that it would be agonising to go and look on. But Philip Maddock was considered for Johnny Ringo as well, as was John Slater, as well as Patrick Troughton and William Dexter. But Alan Tilvan was considered, who is Forrester in Planet of Giants, who played a lot of Americans on British TV, and he has a sort of thick-set American look about him, and he's R.K. Maroon in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So, an actor of some heft, and he did loads, Alan Tilvan. It would have been nice to see him in Doctor Who again. But I'm glad we get the people that we get, because for many it's their only appearance in Doctor Who. They looked at Ewan Solon as well, who actually turns up next time in The Savages, so it's a good job they didn't get him. Or maybe we'd have had somebody else in The Savages, I don't know. So yeah, and as I say, Cease Linder from Quatermass and the Pit, who is a Canadian, and yeah, Donald Sutherland was sort of apparently for Wyatt Earp, which is odd casting. Because he was young then, of course, but the real deal, Canadian. It would have been great to have Sutherland in Doctor Who, but I wouldn't want to lose John Alderson, who I like as an actor, and I like the fact that an actor from Blazing Saddles is in Doctor Who, and also John Alderson had been in he'd been one of the other Earps. You see Virgil Earp in the film The Gunfight at the OK Corral in 1955. So it's not his first visit to the OK Corral. And he's a genuine Western actor. And he's in Blazing Saddles. And he's in the Beiderbecke, one of the Beidebecks as well. No, I just love John Alderson. And he died in a Hollywood actors retirement home in California, and was as a really interesting guy with a really interesting career, and that really weird sort of straddling of genuine American Western actor, whilst also being a guy that did British stuff and was British, but conducted himself really as an American and as a kind of cowboy. So I wouldn't want to lose him, even if we'd gain Donald Sutherland. But then again, I wouldn't want to lose if, Donald Sutherland might have been a good Ike Clanton, but, then I would have never spent an alarming couple of afternoons in the Camden flat of William Hurntle asking me to write his biography and getting his wife to bring me in 4 cans of special brew, telling me, because he said, I'm an alcoholic, I don't drink, but I don't really trust people that don't drink, so I got her to get you some booze. 4 cans of special. So I'm there with Ike Clanton with all his paperwork and his brochures for his nudist island that got infected with chemical waste, saying I'm a bit skint at the moment because I lost £10 million, but I've had a really interesting life. I'd like you to would you help me write my life story? And I'm just like, I can't, I'm getting divorced, I'm doing this Who's Round podcast. I didn't say any of this. So I went, I'll sort of think, I'll try. And he said, and he lived in Thailand. So you might need to fill in some blanks there. And he said, and he said, I haven't got any money. But he then indicated his wife as she was going out and said, but she's got a sister. And I mean, at that point, I suppose if you were writing a newspaper article, you'd go, at that point, I made my excuses and left. I didn't. I just sort of stumbled over my words and listened to him tell him his life story 3 times, actually, because I did it. I listened to him once because he didn't want me to record it first because he wanted to make sure it was all right. It was brilliant. I then recorded him for Who's Round, and it wasn't quite so good because he kept saying, and as I just said, and it's like, don't say that because we weren't recording that bit. And then I invited a friend back to meet him a few weeks later, who I thought might have been good for writing his biography, and then got him to tell the stories all over again. So I did it, 3 times with William Herndale, Ike Clanton. So what a fascinating fellow, but what a terrible actor. And you can be both of those things. It's fine. So those are some of the hair-raising stories that I get up to when trying to track down actors with a minor involvement in Doctor Who. And sometimes I get to meet people related to actors that guest starred in Doctor Who. And that's what happened when I met Martin Jameson, who is the son of Anthony Jacobs, who plays Doc Holliday. And Martin has actually wrote a very interesting radio play about his dad and his dad's involvement with some things at the BBC. And it's really interesting. It's a fantastic play. I will ask Martin if I can tell you a little bit more about that. Actually, you might be interested. It's just a nice little tangential thing. So listen up, everybody. Let us make our way to the OK Corral, which is the final episode of the Gunfighters. I hope I haven't just said all of the stuff that I've got interesting to say in the preamble, and I've just dropped my. Let me back that as my remote controls on. Right, so I'm going to press play, and I hope you are too, in 3, 2, 1. Well, and of course, what is fascinating about this episode, it is the last Doctor Who episode of classic Doctor Who to have an individual episode title. Seems weird to say that now, because that was always it's a thing that they did in the old days that you'd never do now. And of course, that is actually what Doctor Who does do now. You know, it's very rare, apart from the end of time and things, to have a part 1 and a part 2. I'm actually still quite uneasy with the whole modern thing of going, The Empty Child / The Doctor Dances, Human Nature / Family of Blood, which seems a bit odd. But it only seems odd because I'm used to part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. But obviously that wasn't the original way of doing things. The original way of doing things was this. I loved Richard Beale. Great face he had. Still acting well till late in the day. That's not David Graham, by the way, as Charlie on the bar. They needed to not pay him for this week, so that was an extra on the bar. And there's no cliffhanger reprise. I think there originally was, because, as you'll notice at the end, the cast, which is normally done in order of appearance, after the Doctor, it's the Doctor, then the cast in order of appearance, lists Warren and the Clantons first. But this episode has been massively edited, or something's gone on, because this is on film, and Rex Tucker has had his name removed from the closing credits. So there's an issue gone on. Nobody was happy at the time, clearly, and that may have affected the reputation of the Gunfighters, is that clearly nobody was particularly happy at the time. The director doesn't make it to the end of editing, as it were. This has the unusual thing of it's heavily edited, in post, or something's done to it in post, because it's on film, and the director's name is not on the credits. Hartnell does a lovely bit of comedy dead body acting there. That's pretty grim, isn't it? Now here we have definitely a bit of a sort of comedy stutter stuff going on. Just kid brother Warren Earp. They're like big kids, really, aren't they? That's not the most sophisticated bit of humour, but it's the actors trying a bit of business. Reed Deruin's good, isn't he? That's a lovely shot of the shadow of the jail. And this well done, because Warren is very sweet, and Martin Huntley does a nice job with his limited screen time. It's curious though, because he has this death, doesn't he, where it says, "Don't tell Morgan they got my gun." We never see Morgan. We don't know what, we don't, that doesn't have a tug for us, apart from the fact it's to try and make it a sort of sad moment. But it's an interesting sort of expansion of the world of the story. and it suddenly, it suddenly gets very, very serious. Got my gun. Oh dear. Oh, bless him. And I'm sure. I'm sure Sonia Malcolm said, "Oh, we were all very sad when he died." We thought he was sweet. Victor Carin has come in as Virgil Earp. He was a Scottish actor and writer and translator. Victor Zaccarini is his real name. Carin is his sort of middle two syllables. I think John Alderson is excellent here with the grief that he's doing, and the we're suddenly in very, very serious territory here, and the doctor's kind of been shoved out of the way, and this is the sort of major dramatic meat of the story in the episode, and the doctor's not involved. But I quite like this, that they sort of pay some attention to the idea that the Earps have kind of thrown the law away to turn it into a personal score. Obviously, the OK Corral was very controversial, actually, and the lines between good guys and bad guys are somewhat blurred, and the idea that Wyatt Earp was this honourable lawman is not necessarily borne out by historical fact, even if a lot of writing at the time, which was done by, there was propaganda and all sorts of things. The Wild West and its chronicling is a fascinating thing, and I only know this from sort of, I wanted to learn about, because the OK Corral was in Doctor Who. I read a bit about when I was bored at home. One weekend we had a thing called the People's Almanac, which had all sorts of historical stuff and film lists and all sorts of stuff, and it had stuff about the OK Corral and what really went on and why some what some of the myths might have been. I like all this business with the. I actually think I like the look of that hearth. But all that little business of the Clantons eating there at the top of the scene, and the stretching across, and Park Lantern banging on the table. I think that's nice business, makes it come alive, and sort of believe the dynamic there. But yeah, the whole sort of real story of the OK Corral is. Another high camera, beautiful, is a salutary lesson in sort of mythologizing and the real truth behind some well documented historical events, or oft depicted historical events that we think we've got a vague idea of, that actually turned out to be a bit less black and white and goodies and baddies than we might like to think. But and by any standards, by today, morality wise, I think the Earps probably came up fairly short. But also fascinating to think that how close to our recent history that this is, and that a lot of these guys were still alive into the 20th century. So I knew people, my grandparents' generation were alive at the same time that people like the Earps were alive, which is a weird sort of crossover, because it seems like such another world. And that's because I'm not from the States. I'm sure if you're from America, there are you can see remnants and echoes and probably modern day equivalents of some sort of things from Western fiction, culture, depiction, etc. But it's very alien to us here, which is why of course Westerns are not often done on British television, and there's a cause. There's definitely he's very good, actually, Victor Carin. He was Scottish, of his Italian stock. I do have something to say about him. But is this the first? This may well be the first Western ever attempted on British television. And if that's the case, well done, Doctor Who. And there's no bad vaudeville going on here, and there's some good performances. There are some not good performances. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I like the way that Ringo's so dismissive of Billy. It does bring a bit of difference to the three Clanton brothers, who I think do suffer from being not differentiated quite enough, and not well enough acted. They're the main sort of threatening protagonists throughout, but actually they're probably the least interesting of the characters. And I like the way that Bat won't get involved in the gunfight, and I love the, Alderson's looking like he means business, but Cairns great. He's got a lovely manner about him, and he looks the part. He was a regular. He was in Raffles. Was he Inspector Mackenzie in Raffles, which was a series with Anthony Valentine, and did various bits of bobs. Was he in Sutherland's Law as well? Various bits of bobs, but was also a playwright and translator. But what is most memorable about him for me? Well, he died on my birthday. 2nd of January 1981. It's definitely 2nd of January, I think, or 1st. No, 2nd, definitely 2nd, which is my birthday. But he was ill of cancer. A great entry there from Anthony Jacobs, hand on his hip. Hello, you went for me. I like that. And I've just been, doesn't he say last week, I've just been beaten to the draw. So, yeah, Victor Karen was followed by a documentary, The Last Taboo, I think, facing up to his terminal cancer diagnosis. And I think it follows him, in his last days, and was quite controversial at the time because it was covering the last taboo, death. And he was the person that they followed. And I've never seen it. And as I say this, would that... Oh, look at that. That rogue hair is there again on Anthony Jacobs' moustache. Pluck that hair. Chop that hair. Do something with that hair. It's really annoying. I would that be an interesting extra on the Gunfighters documentary following one of the cast who's in one episode, but it's an archival thing. It wouldn't necessarily get released on anything else, would it? Well, I don't know. It's not often one comes up with a suggestion for the editors of the Blu-ray range for a Blu-ray box set that isn't being planned yet. That I have no idea of the practicalities of. So I'll tell you what. I'll email the actual proper people rather than speak into the air. It may be that it's not deemed interesting enough, but I would certainly accept it as an interesting extra. But I know that my desires are pretty niche and bespoke. I like the way he does this funny little laugh here. He's got a great sort of ratty little rattlesnake thing about him. They're drinking milk, and I've always worried about milk in westerns because they didn't have fridges, did they? It was really hot. Would they have had fridges? No, they wouldn't have had fridges. So milk would have been pretty curdled, I would say, in the Wild West. I'd say drink anything but. That's why I drank so much booze, because it doesn't go off. There's a few cowboys outside the back there walking up and down to fill the picture. And I'm sure Richard Beale said that he'd when he was breaking off from rehearsals, was it for this or might have been for something else? He went outside for a smoke or a breath of fresh air or something and saw somebody jump off a bridge, and jump off a bridge into the Thames. Riverside. Or was this TC one? Anyway, maybe he was. I can't remember what he was talking about, but the gist of it. Let's not get bogged down on the specifics of the program being made in geography. The geography was he was at Riverside and he saw somebody jump off a bridge into the River Thames, and the punchline was he went in and told somebody, and they went, yeah, okay, anyway, let's get back to work, i.e. somebody else will deal with that. You think, oh, that's a pretty grim epitaph for that terrible moment for that person who's sad and tragic and heartrending. Death has now become a slightly badly misreported story in a Doctor Who commentary 50 years later. Gosh, perspective, eh? Read de Ruin's good. He's the genuine article. But of course, and I love he's got a tailcoat as well. It's a bit sort of it's a good costume. That it's something sort of slightly harlequin-y about it. I rather like it. It's almost cosmic hobo-y. That's a squat little nasty little sawn-off shotgun as well. But yes, the doctor is very much peripheral because we're gonna. I mean, he's not even in the major sequence here. But Cotton's already done this, hasn't he? He's had a high comedy with the Mythmakers, which has some wonderful, wonderful jokes in it. And again, a sort of slightly bawdy, dirty, scuzzy sort of vibe to it. It takes history and goes, this was dirty, this was, visceral and mean, and life was cheap. But also, here are some torturous puns and some literary-based jokes. It's a really fun way to play with Doctor Who in a way. It's not. They are funny, but they're not without their genuine sense of danger. There's both of the Cotton stories, although they are, they're aiming for high comedy in places. Death is never too far away, and the deaths can be pretty grim. Did I do? It was a tag. She's great. Stone with the ups. Yeah. And again, he's giving it real gravity here amongst the high comedy. They're not selling the danger short. So here we go. We're now suddenly on film, out of phase film even, but means we've got he's even got a jet black horse as well, Johnny Ringo. But this is on film, so we have quite a nice big set, and this is the big. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we had the original film for this? It would look gorgeous. As it is, it's a bit blurry. David Cole isn't very good. Now, there's a lot of people talk about it's a mistake in this that the Earps sort of walk into a hail of bullets, but I think that's accounted for with that line where he says, "Wait until they get into range, keep firing until they get into range, and then keep firing." That's a great shot. Look, that's a beautiful shot. I remember watching this with an older friend of mine who knew his stuff, and he said to me, he said, those guns, they weren't particularly accurate, and also they didn't have a fantastic range, which is why a sharpshooter would be was really important back then, because it was there was lots of bullets flying around, but actually being a dead good shot and a quick shot and a pin sharp accurate shot would make you a great survivor and a great lawman / criminal, depending on what you wanted to be. And that actually it's not that unrealistic that they're walking into a hail of gunfire, because the bullets wouldn't be reaching at that range. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it's resetting the balance from those who think, well, that's just a crazy mistake that they're being fired at and seemingly impervious to the bullets, but they don't seem that far away, though, it has to be said. But that's beautifully, that camera coming up. Ken Westbury is the cameraman. That was a beautiful shot from. I like the whole thing of the guys turning. That's nicely westerny of the the start of the sequence, and then you have the camera and I love the way they both fire in unison there. And Ken Westbury, I think, is doing a fantastic job as the cameraman here. And he's pretty clinical and deadly sharp there. I believe Holiday there, the way that he sort of darts behind the bag. He takes his eye off the ball a bit here, Ringo, but of course this has been nicely set up, that we know that Doc Holliday has this spare gun, and you can see Ringo trying to work out what's going on there. It's nicely done, and it gives Dodo a little bit of agency, that her breaking away at exactly the right time causes Ringo to buy it. And he's the kind of main baddie, but the first one to be dispatched. He doesn't get as good a parting line as My Ghoul has just been split into 3 parts. I will next time is the kind of failed Cowboys equivalent of next time I shall not be so lenient. So that's the end of Johnny Ringo. He's not in it that much, is he? But he's a welcome presence while he is. We have that good line to the Ringo is here. He ain't no more, or whatever. So Dodo's on film. Doc Holliday's wispy bit of moustache is not on film, I'm pleased to say. He ain't no more. That's good. I'm gonna get Doc Holliday, says Doc Holiday. Yeah, Holiday. That's his vowels are not very American. But there's a lot of bullets being fired here. This is good stuff. If he has to it's about getting sort of close enough to hit. Oh dear, this is they're quite cruelly dispensed, these killings. It's again from being sort of slightly comedic, we suddenly get a massacre where the heroes are there's no sort of I always have a game with Con Air, the Nicolas Cage film, where he's the good guy because every time somebody dies who shouldn't, he does a sort of sad look. He sort of looks his eyes to the ground and shakes his head. And there's none of this from the heroes where they're cutting down the bad guys and they sort of look, this is grim work, but we have to do it. These guys are like, no, he's just run out of bullets, and they're like, okay, we're still gonna kill you. And that's nicely shot, and there's a great shot on an Ariel magazine of I think it's the front of an Ariel or some industry magazine, which is the camera at the top there over Bill Hurndall's shoulder, and Bill had a copy of that, and Ken Westbury's in the picture, and actually that's a great fall that he does as well, because he wasn't a stuntman, and that was a pretty game fall, and that's beautiful shooting of the feet there and all of that, but there was some arguments about the mounting of this and the putting together of this episode, which led to it having a bit of surgery, and Rex Tucker taking his name off the credits, but his daughter has been there lurking somewhere, who's a later part of Roger and Freddy, which I like. His daughter is not Sheena Marsh, as was written up for some time. I wish somebody had, you'd have kept that, wouldn't you? If I'd been Anthony Jacobs, I'd have kept that. Have a look in your attic, Martin. See if you've got that. Oh, and it's sad. I don't like the fact the Doctor throws the poster away. I'd like to think he takes a part of each adventure with him, even if only in his heart or in his memories. I used this when I did the In Memoriam and had Jackie on. It's a lovely close up of her, and she's smiling and having a good time. Bless her. I have a lot of affection. I as I say, I don't think Dodo's very good. I don't think Jackie Lane is particularly brilliant, but she's. I wish he hadn't thrown the poster away. That makes me sad. But I love her in this, and as I say, having sort of had her as this mysterious person who we thought hated Doctor Who, actually she wasn't. When I met her, she was absolutely lovely. And it just goes to show that what we think because of the main headline is not necessarily the truth. I think this was the clip showed of Hartnell on the news when he died. They showed this clip to announce the death of William Hartnell. That's John Raven, who is an extra in The Savages, episode 1. Who only died last year. He was a dancer and stuff at the West End, and you sort of go, I wonder whatever became of him, and then you find out. I tend to find out the year that they've died in order to put them on my In Memoriam. John Raven there plays that Savage. So there we go. That is the end of the Gunfighters. I think it was good. It wasn't bad, and it certainly weren't ugly. Yeah, a lot of fun to be had from Dodo, a lot of fun to be had from the ballad. A lot of fun to be had from some of the performances, but also, Ken Westbury. I mean, I've spoken to Ken. He's in his 90s now. Worked on Kind Hearts and Coronets. Brilliant cameraman. Also the cameraman on Fury from the Deep. He did some of the interiors for Abominable Snowmen. Ken's excellent. A legend, who also happens to have done some Doctor Who, but was very good enough to talk to us for the Fury from the Deep Blu-ray DVD commentary. I'm so glad we got to speak to Ken. I should probably drop him a line again. I try and drop these people a line every now and again just to remind them that we still think of them. But you don't want to bother people. But every time I think, I don't want to bother these people, they're actually very pleased that people get in touch and are still interested. So you need to get over yourself sometimes. But I never want to be a pest. It's a fight. There's always a balance. Anyway, what is my favourite thing? And I've got to choose two favourite things. Even though Martin isn't doing this process, we've got to choose two favourite things about one for episode 4 of the Gunfighters, and then a bonus favourite thing. I sort of chose the production first, which I think has to probably include the sets and the film camera work. I was going to choose. I do like Ken Westbury's film camera work for that final sequence. I think it's really elegant. I think it's really of the genre. I think it's nicely mounted and good looking. I think my favourite performance is it's a tough one between John Alderson as Wyatt Earp, who is funny and then goes deadly serious in that final instalment, and brings real weight to that loss that he feels for his brother, who had such little screen time. But we do feel that. I think that's very well done amidst all the nonsense. And Anthony Jacobs, who I think is brilliant. He's got that, he's got that sort of sly, sort of slightly pinched, rattlesnake kind of delivery and demeanor, and he's very funny, but he's also very dangerous. He's very likable, but he's also very ruthless, and he negotiates that journey very, very well. I like the fact that it's the worst Doctor Who story of all time that actually turns out not to be, and all of the brouhaha around that makes us endlessly discuss the whys and the wherefores, and but also places it in the history of that. I'm brandishing my Doctor Who a celebration, which was such an important part of my Doctor Who education. Even the bits I disagree with like that, I still treasure every word and every syllable, particularly of that chapter written by J. Jeremy Bentham, which was my guide to Doctor Who, my first real guide to all of the Doctor Who stories, and I read it and reread it over and over again, and that was all I had to conjure every single Doctor Who story. And some of these things were things I might never get to see. I mean, some I still haven't, of course, but at least I've heard the soundtracks and I know what they look like. But that was all a journey that unfolded over years, not now. If you're a new fan now, you can pretty much the minutiae of every production is available to you at the tap of a keyboard if you so want it to be. I'm so lucky in a way that actually this has been a journey through time to come to understand different things about the show, to the point now that the things the things I have to sort of delve into now are like getting a contribution from the son of a guest star, or thinking about trying to track down a documentary that's completely won't even mention Doctor Who, that covers something that happened to somebody who's in one episode. All of those sorts of things. And I love that it's a never-ending journey, and it's a never-ending reassessment, and it's a never-ending revisit. And I think it's a charming story that is given extra luster by the fact that it has this dog of a reputation, which it's never quite shaken. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that doesn't like it has been influenced by that sort of the way it was written up first, because a lot of people will have come to it fresh and just gone, I don't like it, but I do also think it's the victim of that. It's what's that old sociology experiment where a school teacher's given a class and they're told which ones will be the best pupils and which ones are the worst, and they've been they've been picked entirely at random, and actually at the end of the year, what they've been told is echoed by the results. But of course, I would say that because I really like it, so it separates me from the horde. So get out of town. I think I have to choose, and it doesn't really matter for which is which. I think I have to choose Anthony Jacobs and I'm not just doing that because Martin's. In fact, I probably nearly didn't because Martin's going to be listening and Martin's going to be choosing. But he is, I think it is the best performance and he is the best character. And he's got loads of great lines. I love the way he has the slug of whiskey. I love the way he shoots the guy and nicks his breakfast. I love that scene that he has with Dodo. And I love the way that he does that thing that you have to do in Doctor Who, is to be able to move from the comedic and the slightly heightened to the realistic and the plausible. And he's very, very funny, but he's also very, very dangerous. He's a comedic character who's also a tangible, plausible threat, even though he happens to be a threat on the side of the good guys. But that then plays into the slightly sort of blurry morality of this whole thing, where even the good guys are sort of ruthless killers, and it doesn't shy away from that. So I think Anthony Jacobs has to be my choice, say for episode 4, but it covers all episodes. And my overall thing, I'm going to choose the ballad. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I love the ballad. I love the fact that Doctor Who, which has, a wonderful sort of kindergarten percussion, strange score for the Celestial Toymaker, the story prior to this, and then a beautiful, haunting, bleeding violins to tell the sort of philosophical morality tale of the savages next time, and in the middle has a ballad sung by Nurse Gladys Emmanuel from Open All Hours, sung by Captain Rack, sung by the wonderful Linda Barron, and has been bold, and the director's gone, well, there's this ballad that's in the story, hell, I'm going to make that the score. Tristram Carey, the guy that did the discordant, brilliant alien echoing world of the dead planet, of the planet Skaro in the Daleks, and has done other scores as well, of course. But you're the discordant, haunting alien guy. I want you to now do a Western ballad. Do not forsake me, Tristram Carey. And I don't think he did. And I know that the ballad is a thing that some people hate, but I love it. But I also, I'll give a nod to that final sequence, which, doesn't have the Doctor in it, shockingly. But I mean, you wouldn't want him in it. I think he is in the book, isn't he? And he accidentally, Phineas gets shot in the head accidentally, doesn't he? Doesn't kill him, because I think it bounces off his skull. That's the running joke, I think, that Phineas keeps getting clonked on the head. And in the book, they only kill Ike and the McClarys, which is closer to the reality of it. But this was never going to be a real depiction. But it is a bit of a bloodbath, and it's pretty unpleasant. The jokes all kind of go out the window. But that is an excellently mounted film sequence with some lovely angles and some lovely, camera movement too. So those are my two things. What did Martin like about episode 4?
Blurmy neck. Right, I've just watched the final episode, the OK Corral, and my God, it's so violent. And there's smoking. There needs to be more smoking in Doctor Who. But there's smoking and there's a lot of killing. And what's so brilliant, do you know, I've got a horrible feeling in the 90s, I never got to the end of it. Because my dad is brilliant. He shoots everybody. He's got a spare gun. Oh, it's terrific. And I have to say, I have still absolutely no idea what was going on. Who's Johnny Ringo? What on earth? What's he got to do with anything? And there's just lots of fighting and a battle. And I don't know who's supposed to be the good people and the bad people. Dad seems to be good mates with William Hartnell at the end, which is great. I'm glad he doesn't get killed, and that he's a terribly good shot. So, yeah, it was, wow, what an experience. So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed watching it. And it's actually sort of kind of rather well made in its own way, considering it's all in a studio. And, yeah, that's kind of it, really. That's all I have to say. I'm rather proud of it. I'm rather proud to be associated with it. And so that's the end of my commentary, my little DVD extra on Gunfighters. So I hope you've enjoyed it. So I'm Martin Jameson, a.k.a. Martin Jacobs. I'm a writer. I used to write Holby City and Casualty and Emmerdale, lots of things like that, lots of things on the radio. You can go to my website and find out the stuff I've done on www.ninjamarmoset.com. Ninja Marmoset. If you just Google Ninja Marmoset, you get my website, because no one else is called Ninja Marmoset. And you find out all about me, all the different things I do. I review a lot for Sci-Fi Bulletin as well. And, take a look and see what's going on. It would be lovely to see you over there on my website. Anyway, I've really enjoyed this. And it was sort of cathartic and interesting to revisit my dad in this show. And I was rather proud of him. I tell you what, as well, you know what he really does? He does the accent really well. He acts it for real. But hey, those eyes. I mean, check this episode. If you've not watched it in a while, check it out. Look what he does with his eyes. There's a scene in the first episode where he's hiding behind a door. He's listening to the stuff that's going on. And he knows the camera's on him. And he knows the dialogue is somewhere else. And he's saying, look at me. Look at my eyes. And he does it again in the later episodes. He knows what to do. He's a stage actor, he's a radio actor, but he really understands television as well. And it's rather wonderful. And it's great to see him do that. It's a shame it's not available. I wrote a play about my dad called Radio Days, which was sort of a fictional thriller, but it was based on my dad's life as a radio actor. And it was on Radio 4 Extra not too long ago. Maybe they'll do it again at some point. And if they do, maybe Toby can flag it up and everyone can have a listen. Because it's this story, very loving story about him as a radio actor and his dedication to things. But he was a troubled man as well. So it's lovely to see him in this Doctor Who series. Okay, that's me. I'm going to go to bed now and dream about firing my 6-shooter. Bye.
Oh, that was nice. I sensed a little bit of emotion from Martin at the end there. Radio Days. It's an excellent play. That too could be an extra. Shall we formulate the Blu-ray release of season? I mean, I should think it's years off the season 3 Blu-ray. We've got to wait for all the episodes to come back. That's me putting on a silly accent to give a different tenor to an enunciation in the way that Johnny Ringo does in episode 3. I talked last episode about people sometimes putting on a funny accent when they want to give something a different emphasis, and that's what I did just then. But yeah, Radio Days, because it is a fictionalized account of his dad's life and something that happened to his dad in his days as a radio actor. That would be a good extra on the Gunfighters Blu-ray as well. Right, mental note. I've just thought of 2 extras for the Gunfighter, because, we didn't do a making of at the time. We should have done, because there were loads of people to interview when we were doing the DVD. We got as many as we could on the commentary. I think more than we could, strictly speaking, afford, I think, because we weren't originally going to have Richard Beale on it, but I kind of twisted John's arm and said, because he was in lots of other Doctor Who stories, I wanted to meet Richard Beale, really. Let's get him in. We didn't know where William Herndon was at the time, but, we could have, if we were making a documentary, we could have probably dug a little deeper and gone a little further, and maybe got him, because I did eventually, and maybe Sheena Marsh would have been persuaded if we'd been making an official product with a bit of cash behind it. Who knows? But they've all gone now. What a shame. But Martin, shortly after this, let me know that something amusing had happened. And I said, well, I haven't recorded it yet. He said, it's just something that tied in. So I've got another little audio file from Martin as a little bonus at the end of this commentary. Here's Martin again.
Hello again. I'm back for a little postscript. So if I'm sounding just ever so slightly sibilant, a bit like Car the Constrictor from the Jungle Book, it's because in a cruel twist of fate, just after recording my responses to the 4 episodes of the Gunfighters, where I was looking at my dad extracting William Hartnell's tooth, the wisdom tooth on my upper left of my mouth at the back decided to crack, and which was incredibly painful. So the following day I rang the dentist. I said, oh, can I come in? Anyway, so this morning, 2 days later, I went to the dentist, and he tried to rescue it, but he couldn't. And I had to have my wisdom tooth taken out, which, if any of you have ever had that done, you'll know is really, really unpleasant. So while I was waiting for the local anaesthetic to kick in, I said to this very, very nice young dentist, I have a sort of oblique connection to your trade, in that I've just been watching my father playing Doc Holliday in Doctor Who with William Hartnell, where obviously Doc Holliday is a dentist of sorts, and when the doctor is in the chair, they don't have Novocaine, and so Doc Holliday offers him some whiskey to drink. So I said, if you have a bottle of Red Eye, I'll have that. So the dentist said, well, as you happen to mention it, no, he didn't get out a bottle of whiskey, though it would have been nice. He said, now that you mention it, he said, during lockdown, because people couldn't get to the dentist and they had to wait weeks or months to get an appointment, and they were in agony for ages, rather a lot of people took to anaesthetising the pain with whiskey. So there you go. Life imitating art, or art imitating life, whichever way around you want to look at it. And I just thought it was worth adding this, because it was, what do they call it? It was, when time and when events come together, there's a word, synchronicity. I think that's the word, synchronicity. A little bit of that happened. Anyway, I just thought I'd add that strange little coincidence to my account. But perhaps it's my father coming back to haunt me in some strange and deeply ironic way. All right, so this is Martin Jameson, a.k.a. Martin Jacobs, a.k.a. Car the Constrictor, the sibilant constrictor, signing off. Good night again.
I really enjoyed Martin's contribution, and I hope you did too. I sort of like the sort of broad spectrum of guests we get for this. I've been very lucky by the people who've agreed to do it, and sometimes it's people you've heard of, sometimes it's people you haven't heard of but you might kind of have an inkling who they are, sometimes it's people you wouldn't expect but seem kind of appropriate, and sometimes it's people who are fans of Doctor Who I think you should hear from, because they're nice, fun and interesting people, and they don't have to be exemplars of the arts in order to to get a ticket to Podcastville. But in Martin's case, a unique specimen, somebody who is an exemplar in his field in the arts, but also has a tie with the story because his dad was in it, but who isn't necessarily a Doctor Who fan. But I think that's quite fun as well, to have somebody come in who isn't well versed in the entirety of Doctor Who, but who knows his television and knows his stuff and is an articulate and very witty commentator. I love Martin's Facebook page, where he gets to grips with quite a lot of modern television that sometimes struggles to escape his wrath, and he does reviews for Sci-Fi Bulletin as well, and very good ones too. So do chase down his work. I always look forward to when he's got something new to say, or when he's written something down, which is why I just thought, let's chance it. I don't think I asked him to do the Gunfighters. I said, would you, is there a Doctor Who story you would do? And he said, well, why don't I do the Gunfighters? And I thought, I'm not sure I thought of that, because you've got a personal stake in it, but yeah, let's go for it. So that's nice, because quite a few different people could have chosen the Gunfighters, and the angle would have been obvious. Everyone hates the Gunfighters, let's champion it, which is a sort of predictable way to go now, actually. And of course, that's the angle that I took. I think it's actually quite fun that our guest didn't have any of that baggage, but had a different kind of association with it. So I hope that was fun for you. It's certainly fun for me, and I know the people that have listened to the early episodes already have really cherished Martin's unique insight and unique association with the show. So it just goes to show that this was no effort for me. That there will be stories that will be harder for me, but that a story that is largely considered to be languishing near the bottom of Doctor Who popularity, even now, even though it's certainly escaped the label of being the worst Doctor Who story ever, still struggles to break out of the depths of Doctor Who popularity. It's never going to be. It's never going to escape from the lowest tier, I think, in polls and things like that. And I think that's a shame, because I think it is entirely what it wants to be. I think the scriptwriter has does really interesting things with Doctor Who. I'm not sure he quite gets Doctor Who, but I do find that kind of charming. And when you've got 48 episodes a year or whatever, you can do that. You can have something that's a bit of a break from the norm and the style. In fact, you're sort of almost desperate for it to have the show do something very different. It's part of that weird landscape that the Wiles and Tosh era has, where the show explores very different ways of doing a Doctor Who story. Not all of them comfortable fits, but again, you can kind of have that with the show then, and it actually stops it from becoming repetitive and formulaic. I think it's quite bold, as I say, and where Cotton has this really interesting take on the show itself. A very, I think, in the long run, a take on the Doctor that is not tenable, but for 8 episodes is absolutely fine, where he's this slightly confused onlooker who sort of wins by sort of knocking something with his elbow and causing a chain of events that that causes the story to come to a culmination, rather than being a wily manipulator or a smart operator or even a sort of moralistic crusader. He's this sort of accidental tourist, which I rather like, through literary genres or certainly fictional genres. But as I say, probably not a tenable take on the character forever, but certainly works every now and again. And you love these what could have been if the show was in different hands, or because it's an interpretation, and it's an interpretation that made it onto the screen, if only for a few small windows. But then you've got Cotton's unique take on the show, but then handed to a director who clearly not happy, and was has an association with Doctor Who because he was going to be its first producer, but was a well respected and I know Hartnell and Purvis might not have got on with him, but Richard Beale spoke very highly of Rex Tucker, and was a very experienced BBC operator who comes in and takes this sort of knockabout comedic script, but gives it real sort of plausibility as a Western in a BBC studio. There's some beautiful angles. There's some gets a great film cameraman in Ken Westbury for the film sequences, but his shooting and some of those high shots that he gets in the studio are very well. They're very well done, but they're ambitious. It's ambitiously put together. Barry Newbury's set design is phenomenal. I mean, it's really good. And they haven't gone, it's a comedy, so it can be a bit tatty and frayed around the edges. They put, let's put this within as grimy and plausible a Western setting as we kind of can, and there's a real attention to detail. And Stephen's costume does look a bit more like a fancy dress version than everybody else's, even from the sort of sheen of it and under the lighting. It's a slightly cleaner, more costumed version of what is then more plausibly rendered with the grimy, grubby, genuine cowboys. And I think all of that sort of stuff has been really well thought through. So sometimes I think when people are doing comedy, they tell they're off the ball with the other stuff, because it's almost like, well, this is daft, so we don't have to pay quite so much attention to production values and all of that. And I think all of that side of things is excellent. It is let down by some of the performances, which have an extra dimension of badness. Some very bad performances in The Ark, which is another story that I love, but they're not also bad performances with bad American accents. So I think the fact that it's something incongruous on British television, the American accent and the Western thing, the bad performances are kind of get an extra dimension to them. And there's a slight incongruity and uncomfortableness with a Western being done in Britain, but I certainly don't think it's any. I think as Westerns go, I don't think it makes the case for Westerns shouldn't be done in the UK. And there's a wonderful Norbert Smith A Life, Harry Enfield, where he's playing a fictional actor going through all the sort of different shows the different films that he did in his acting career, and that's where there's a gritty northern kitchen sink. It's grim up north, and I'm going off I'm off out to kill some of our kids' pets, and all of that. And there's a Noel Coward does Hamlet, and there's a Will Hay comedy type thing, and there's also a Western where what was it? They called him Strange, and it's I don't hold by no sticking around, and it's all sort of English actors doing very bad sort of Western stuff. And if ever you'd like to come in for a cup of tea, and it's very funny. It's a sort of stilted English acting trying to pull off a Western, and that's what a British Western could have been like. And this is I would urge you to go and watch Norbert Smith A Life. It's a marvellous thing, one of my favourite things. And it's got Murray Watson from Black Orchid as Sir Donald Stuffy, who's this boring old actor. It's got lots of wonderful actors in it, and even Con O'Neill, who's in everything these days, playing Davy Throb, who's basically Cliff Richard from the musical Keep Your Hair On, Daddy-O. So yeah, there's a very witty Western piss take in that. What is it? Come on, Smudgy, there's a sugar lump for you in the next town. That's what it could have been like, and it's a much better Western than that. And those studios were cramped. There's actually a sense of scale and location and place, and some really good performances. I've highlighted the bad ones because I'm trying to account for its sort of bad reputation, but there are some better than average performances in it too. I think Lawrence Payne is wonderful and threatening. His accent's very, very iffy, but he plays the part well. And I think John Alderson, Anthony Jacobs, Sheena Marsh, and Reed DeRuin are terrific. And I've got a soft spot for Richard Beale too. And Hartnell's great in it. Hartnell does the comedy. He gave me a gun, he extracted my tooth. People keep giving me guns and I do wish they wouldn't. All of that stuff. Shane Rimmer's good too. Hartnell's magnificent. Purvis is magnificent. Really knows how to play the comedy. Slightly fades out in the last episode. I think we kind of lose Stephen a little bit, but he's very good as the sort of hapless. I'm having to kind of get away with this whole cowboy thing, and it's definitely Jackie Lane's best story, and I love Dodo in this story. As I say, I think Dodo has some real problems in terms of where she's placed as a companion, what they give her to do, and the fact that she's not great, and yet, despite the fact that I don't think Dodo's up to much most of the time, and I don't think Jackie Lane is the best actress. I'm very fond of Jackie Lane. And the fact that she turned out not to be this dismissive Greta Garbo type, she actually just turned out to be somebody who was a bit shy and not comfortable sort of speaking, really. She didn't dislike Doctor Who, and she had no disdain for it, and was absolutely lovely when I met her. And then subsequently exchanged emails with her where she was, nothing like this, as I say, Greta Garbo figure at all. She was a nice, ordinary lady who was just I think a bit shy and a bit uncomfortable in the limelight, and I love her as Dodo in this. I think she's terrific as Dodo. Wish Dodo had more stories like this to really show her, sweet, vervy, adventure-y side. I think she's a great character in this. So well done, Jackie, as well. So I love the Gunfighters. I didn't have to pretend there was no accentuate the positive despite lots of caveats. In fact, I've had to sort of highlight the negative things, if only to sort of try and account for why it has such a bad reputation. I think it's much better than a lot that surrounds it. I think it's refreshing. It's very much its own beast. I think the landscape of Doctor Who would be poorer without the Gunfighters. So thank you to Martin Jameson, and thank you for listening. The OK Corral? OK? No. It's wonderful.
I think you'll find. I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
The viewing figures, by the way, were not the lowest. I think I mentioned that during the commentary, but as I've got time and space, I haven't referred back to what I said, but I know I poured some doubt on whether the viewing figures were the lowest and whether those viewing figures were enough to convince Innes Lloyd not to do any more historicals. I think the audience appreciation will perhaps had more of an impact on that. The audience appreciation for episode 4, the OK Corral, is 30%. That is extremely low. I think probably the lowest. Episodes 1 to 3 got 45%. 39%, 36%. So it's spiralling downwards, and 30% is an all-time low. It got 5.7 million viewers, episode 4, which is the lowest of the serial. First episode got 6.5. But, if you look at the Smugglers, that, is not far off. And that got lower figures. That got 4.3 million, 4.9 million, 4.2 million, 4.5. But the appreciation is in the 40s. And for context, even when we're supposed to think of Doctor Who being in the doldrums of popularity, the audience appreciation for Trial of a Time Lord was, late 60s, early 70s. For the Happiness Patrol, mid 60s. And viewing figures wise, though, actually Trial of a Time Lord episodes 3 and 4 got 3.9 and 3.7. So again, far lower than the Gunfighters. So the Gunfighters didn't dip the lowest on the axis or whatever that was, but that audience appreciation of 30% for part 4 is a real downer. Thanks very much for listening to this omnibus edition of Happy Times and Places, which was presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest was Martin Jameson, whose musings you can find at ninjamarmoset.com. Ninja Marmoset is also his appellation on Instagram. I'm grateful to Martin and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Nick Delisle, Daniel Brennan, James Brindley, Dara Carville, Luke Ashby, Robert Davis, Andy Priestner, Steve Jenner, John McClade, Colin Varney Earworm, Alex Tilbury, Steve Appleman, Josh Bernard, Michael Page, Tim Knight, Harry Palmer, Mr. M.L. Dunstan, Brandon F. Moore, Owen Hargreaves, Timothy K. Brown, and the Jason Davis. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like your name etched into the woodwork of one of these podcasts? You're done tootin' you would. Well, then go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month, you not only get your name read out occasionally on the credits of these podcasts, but you also get them in advance, 6 months in advance for Happy Times and Places, and a couple of months each usually for Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic. You also get a very infrequent extra podcast called Far Too Much Information, but a frequent AMA, Ask Me Anything, which comes out once, sometimes twice every month, and is your questions addressed to me, but they're usually a bit silly, but we have a lot of fun. Sometimes they're inquiries about certain things that I've done. Whatever. Ask me anything. That's all part of the fun at patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where you also get to comment on the episodes that are being commentated upon and have your comments read out as part of the podcast. And it's a lovely, supportive community there. There's no room for any... People can talk about shortcomings of stories and stuff like that, but it's nice and nobody's unpleasant, and there's never any unnecessariness. The sort of unnecessariness that Doctor Who fans can sometimes unnecessarily do. But if you don't want to have that monthly commitment and be quite as involved as that, you can also donate financially at Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock. Any amount you like, whenever you like. Whereas the Patreon, it's £3 a month to get access to pretty much everything, but the tiers go up if you would like them to, but you get everything at the cheapest paying level. There are also free members at Patreon, but I haven't quite worked out exactly what I should be doing with them. I'll get there, I promise. You can also support these in other ways, non-financial. I mean, you already are by listening, but also if you get them from iTunes or Spotify or any of those places, wherever you get them from, you've got to get them from somewhere, wherever you get them from, if you give them 5 stars and a couple of lines of review and like and subscribe and all of that malarkey, it really, really does help. Talking about all that ghastly internet stuff we have to do, I'm on all the social media. I'm on Twitter at Toby Haydock and at Haydock Podcasts. I'm on Instagram at Toby.Haydock. I'm on Blue Sky, as is my comedy club, which you can also find on Blue Sky at XS Malarkey, XS Malarkey, Malarkey. It's a comedy club I've been running for nearly 30 years and is on in Manchester every Tuesday night, and it brings the best comedians for the lowest prices and is, like my Patreon page, just a sort of benign environment of cheerful entertainment, which I find is in short supply these days. So you can also find me on Facebook as well, if you're not already fed up of me, which, were I in your shoes, I probably would be. And so this is another omnibus that had kind of slipped through the cracks. So it was a while ago I did this one. I don't really remember much about it. I've cut some very long post-credits bits, though. So a reminder, if you like the post-credits bits, these are new on the omnibuses. The original post-credits bits are gone, like the closing titles of the middle episodes on the early BBC video releases. They have been junked. They have been Pamela Nashed, except they still exist on Patreon on the individual episodes. But these were originally packaged just to sort of fill a gap, really, when I needed a bit of breathing space, but they get downloaded more actually than the individual episodes, so there's clearly a market for them. I mean, market in the sense people nobody pays for them when they come out, but that's what the market is these days, isn't it? Anyway, but people seem to like them all bunched up like this. But you are missing out if actually actually you are missing out, because I can't remember what I said in the post-credits bits for episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. All of the post-credits bits on the original releases of these. But it means that the omnibuses are slightly different from the single buses. And for me, I think doing this, it was a way of showing I was making an effort. I felt a bit guilty that I was just bunging out something that had already come out. So I thought, well, if I re-record the opening and the closing, people see that I've actually put some care into it. What I'm not sure that actually works or makes any sense. But here we are. Here I am, 2 years after, well, nearly 3 years after recording the original version of this. I've come to revisit it to stutter my way at the very, very end for the small number of people who gather to watch me do whatever it is I do at the end here. Okay, well, there we go. That was worth sticking out to the bitter end for. Bye.